Chicago, this is your kind of excitement. The Chicago Sting, indoors in the Major Indoor Soccer League. 24 home games at Chicago Stadium. Be there for the nonstop action of America's fastest-growing sport. Call 558-KICK to reserve your tickets. Indoor soccer, the Chicago Sting, your kind of excitement.
The hottest team in Chicago battles Kansas City Sunday afternoon on Ovaltine MISL Mug Day.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Greetings, gang. How are you? My name's Tim Hanlon, and this is Good Seats Still Available. It's the curious little podcast that's devoted to what used to be in professional sports. Thanks for coming by. If you're here for the first time, pull up a chair and give a listen. I think you'll enjoy some of our little meanderings through the world of forgotten sports, teams, and leagues. And if you're a repeat customer, we thank you so much, too. You can pull up a chair, maybe a more plush one because you've been here before. You know how things work around here. These are conversations. These are interesting interviews and discussions with people, both directly and indirectly involved with teams and leagues and sports and things that, for whatever reason, don't exist anymore, but have dotted the landscape of U.S. professional sports over the years, over the decades, some cases over the centuries. And it's a curious little exploration that we do. As we've talked about many times before, I'm not sure quite why I do this, but it's endlessly fascinating. And at least to me it is. And each week it seems that there are dozens and dozens more of you out there who share sort of this curiosity as well. And I think this episode almost encapsulates kind of sort of the zeitgeist behind all of our little adventurous conversations. And our guest is a guy by the name of Doug Verb. And he is probably the sort of quintessential example of the type of person professionally that is so crucial in any professional sports endeavor, perhaps more so now, even more so than it was years and years ago when Doug was sort of at the apex of his promotional career in the sports world, where the art of breaking through public relations and PR, or the same thing, frankly, promotions. How do you stand out in a sea of entertainment choices? And again, today it's probably even more difficult than it was maybe back in the in decades prior, but it's still a hard thing, right? When you especially are a new team in a city, perhaps with other sports franchises that, are need to be competed against or you stand out against or try to compare or contrast against for the entertainment sports marketing dollar. Maybe you're part of a new league, right? Which is sort of a double whammy, right? Because you're a new team and a new league and you got to sort of sell both somewhat simultaneously. And, if you want the sort of ultimate triple word score of challenge, perhaps hell, you're even a new sport. And Doug, is an amazing, an interesting character, as we'll talk about, because in many respects, he was part of sort of that tripartite challenge, if you will, or Rubik's Cube, in a couple of different environments around that. That is a new team, a new league, and sometimes even a new sport. And we're going to talk about his travails, in particular with the North American Soccer League and the Philadelphia Atoms, which was, in many respects, the outdoor soccer in the 70s was still a relatively new sport. We can argue about its history in this country, but in terms of professional, it was only a few years old in the modern sense. His role very seminal in the activities, the promotional activities of the Major Indoor Soccer League. There's your new sport again, right? Indoor soccer, people understood soccer, but the indoor variety, it's a whole new thing. We get into his promotional efforts with the Chicago Sting. We get to some very interesting conversations there. And interestingly, too, his involvement in the earliest days of the Arena Football League. There it is again, where a team or teams, a league, brand new, and a sport, right, where you had to sell all those things. And for our friends out there who are fascinated by this stuff, as am I, you probably know the website that we love from our friend Andy Crossley. It's called Fun While It Lasted, and funwhileitlasted.net is the place. And as I've said many times before, and of course on our episode number 2 with Andy himself, is the unique and unmatched treasure trove of stories and stuff and memorabilia around teams and leagues that don't exist anymore. And in some respects, actually, a bit of an impetus for us getting this podcast up and running. But on that site at funwhileitlasted.net, you will find, if you search for it, a tremendous interview in written form with Doug, and it sort of gave me the concept to go deeper and in audio form via the podcast. So we are tickled pink to have Doug Verb here with us as our guest this week, and we get into all of that stuff and more in just a couple of seconds. So stay tuned. It's coming at you in momentarily. We want to promote, in the theme of promotion, shall we, our sponsors. And again, by enjoying some of what our sponsors offer, you will give some love monetarily to us. And that's, of course, always good because we like to keep pumping out these great shows for you to listen to. And unfortunately, it's not a charity. So here we go. So Audible, right? Audiobooks, you love them, you know them, you can't live without them. At least I can't. And I encourage you to give them a try for yourself as well and give an audiobook a listen. And there's no better way to do that by going to audibletrial.com/goodseats. And our friends at Audible will give you, for doing so, a free month of the Audible service, as well as one free audiobook download for you to listen to and enjoy. 180,000 plus titles and growing. You will find no excuse to find, you will have no problem finding a book that will satisfy your interests. Come on, 180,000 titles. You can't find one? Please give me a break. Give it a try. audibletrial.com/goodseats for your free 1-month subscription to the service and a free audiobook download. I need to stress this. I will do it again. You can cancel at any time. It's no risk. Give it a try. audibletrial.com/goodseats. As they say, you'll be glad you did. And not least, of course, our other friends at sportshistorycollectibles.com. Again, sportshistorycollectibles.com. It's the place to find that perfect gift for the sports enthusiast in your life, especially if there's a team or a league that they remember vividly or fondly or perhaps cursorily, and perhaps would like to cement that memory with a piece of memorabilia for them to own and to love and to enjoy. Sportshistorycollectibles.com, and when you're there, he stumbles his way to saying, and you find something either for your friend, your spouse, whomever, or yourself for that matter, for God's sakes, use the promo code GOODSEATS, will you? Good Seats, that's the promo code at sportshistorycollectibles.com, and for that, you will get 15% off your purchases at the site. Again, it's sportshistorycollectibles.com. Visit there early, visit there often, and we thank them for their sponsorship as well. All right, so in the realm of sponsorship and or promotion and or all that stuff that sort of sits in that big circus tent known as marketing, we segue into our conversation, a fun one. When are they not? But this one is especially fun with our new friend, Doug Verb, here on the big show. Give a listen. Maybe the best thing to do for our audience is to kind of give us a little bit of your background prior to us getting into the weeds of some of the hijinks and hilarity of your sports promotion career, in particular with professional sports. What was the sort of prelude to all of that before we get into it? What was your upbringing and your schooling and your interests as a kid and as a young adult? How did you even, give us some sense of who you were as you were growing up, and maybe a bit of a sense of maybe how you maybe stumbled into this crazy world of now mostly forgotten professional sports stuff.
Neighbors across the street, a young boy who was a year and a half older than me, and his father who was a referee and umpire, for high school and college sports, just got me interested in sports. And they lived across the street, and then we moved a little further up into the suburbs of Philadelphia, and a year later they moved right next door to us. So I always had this great interest with sports. My father didn't, and he worked all the time anyway. So he would take me to one game a year. He had Roberto Clemente was his baseball guy, so we went to see the Pirates. Lenny Wilkins was his basketball guy, so we went to see the old St. Louis Hawks. I don't think we ever went to a football game, so there was no ice hockey in Philly at the time. So that was it, and I can't tell you why. I've never really even thought about that, but always outside playing, whatever was in season. I was a tall string bean, so I went a little more towards basketball, shoveled the driveway of a neighbor to play basketball in the winter, and it was always sports. I can clearly remember my friend Jeff showing me that the third section of the evening bulletin, long dead evening bulletin, the third section every day was sports. And that's where you found out the scores and the box scores, and that's how you learned about things. It was that or radio, and to listen to some Phillies games, and a little bit of television, game of the week. I just had a fascination with it. It's nothing other than that. So I went to college. I was a basketball player. I quickly realized I was going to do nothing but sit on the bench, and had an opportunity at Temple University to, under the great Hall of Fame coach Harry Litwack, to help manage the team. And the Hall of Fame sports information director, Al Schreier, got a hold of me. I was a journalism major, and said, well, why don't you can do some work. Mr. Schreier had and still has, he's still alive, a fear of flying. So he sent me on the trips, and I practiced with the team whenever they needed me to, and I kept the scholarship and did all of the, work study programs, $20 a month. No, I guess it was, I don't know what it was, $20 a week, maybe. I forget. But the first trip I went out to the Far West Classic. It was an 8-team college Christmas tournament. They only had a few then. And we went out there to Portland, Oregon in the rain. Rained every day. And I would call back to the radio stations. I would write stories for the then 3 daily newspapers in Philadelphia, just short things. Sometimes I would just call it in to a desk man. And when I got back, he handed me a whole host of checks. I said, "What's this?" He said, "Well, they pay you when you do this work." So I said, "Wow, this is really great." So there I was with all the money in the world. I was making money from the media outlets. I didn't know they were media outlets at the time. I was making money from school. I was on scholarship. I could work in the summer. I used to keep statistics for the famed Harvey Pollack, the legendary statistician of the 76ers, the Warriors, the man who made the sign 100 when Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Well, I became his second son and would do all the stats at the Big 5 games in the Palestra, at the, everything, even the World Football League, the Philadelphia Bell. I would do stats for that at all the different schools. And one of the best ones, little side story, 5 of us every other Sunday would get in a car in South Philadelphia and drive down to Baltimore to be the stat crew for the Baltimore Colts at Old Memorial Stadium. Now, I never understood why they couldn't find 5 people to do stats in Baltimore, but we did it, and we were happy for it, and that lasted about 3 years. We'd have those great crab cakes at halftime with the windows open of the press box in the old days before computers, and writing notes as to how many yards Alan Amici had, and it was way after Johnny Unitas, probably after Alan Amici too. So I had a great background with that. I started working for some of the newspapers there, just doing weekends in the fall, high schools, and I never really, I wanted to be a sports information director. And back in the day, I went to college from 68 to 72. And in the day, they didn't have internships. They didn't have sports business, sports management, sports anything. There was no curriculum for that. So I had basically what amounted to an internship working for Mr. Schreier. And he was the dean then, and he was for many, many years. I think he retired maybe 5 years ago. So that was an incredible experience, and I just got to do everything. And I wanted to be an SID, but they only had one SID at the major schools. I bet Notre Dame probably had two because of their football program, but that was it. So there weren't many jobs. And I vividly remember at the beginning of my junior year, Mr. Schreier got funding for an assistant. And I walked in there. I thought for sure, okay, it's going to be me. And he said, no, I've hired Dave Leonard from Colgate. And I was just heartbroken. And I said, well, why? So he said, well, I couldn't hire you. Your mother would kill me. I said, why? He said, because you wouldn't finish school. Oh, sure I would. I'll go to school at night. I'll do during the day I can do things and all. He said, no, you wouldn't do that. So I was pretty heartbroken, and he was he was definitely absolutely right. So I graduated. There were no SID jobs. I took a job at the Norristown Times Herald. Crusty old sports editor there, Red McCarthy, looked at my name, Verb. He said, Verb, huh? You're going to write a column, Verb's Action. It'll be a notes column. I said, come on, everybody's made fun of my name and Action Verb and this and come on. So I hemmed and hawed. It didn't matter to him. He just kept smoking a little stub of a cigar and with a glass of scotch on the table on his desk. And, it turned out to be a pretty good column, and he taught me the benefit of a weekly paycheck. So I did that and instantly fell in love with the newspaper game and, ink in my veins, and it was great. Moved on to the Philadelphia Daily News, which was, probably maybe the best sports section in America, certainly one of the top 5 incredible writers there, Tom Cushman, Bill Conlon on baseball, Stan Hockman, just great, right? Ray Didinger, who's a Hall of Famer in the Football Hall of Fame. So that was a great place to be for a while. And then I moved to the Washington Post. And they owned the Trenton Times, so I was there and covered everything in Philadelphia, New York. And it was great. I could write anything I wanted because nobody ever read it. The athletes never read it, so nobody was bothered by it. But I covered a lot of soccer. It was 1976, 77, and the Cosmos were the big thing. It was an absolute circus with all the big stars. Warner Brothers owned them, Pele, Canaglia, Beckenbauer, Carlos Alberto. So I got to know a little bit about soccer. Trenton was a huge soccer area. Trenton and St. Louis at the time were the two major places, maybe some places in Rhode Island with the Portuguese. And I was covering a lot of it. I got a call one day from a guy named Ed Tepper, and he said, I'd like to, Ed owned the Philadelphia Wings of the, I guess it was called the National Lacrosse Team at the time.
Yes, that was National Lacrosse League. 1974-75 version of the National Lacrosse League. And by the way, as we're recording this week's episode is with our friend Russ Klein, the co-founder of the successor of that, which was the then Eagle Box Lacrosse League and Major Indoor Lacrosse League, and now the newly renamed National Lacrosse League. But yes, that the original Philadelphia Wings was 74-75, yeah.
Right. And Ed had owned them, and they were very successful coming off of the Broad Street Bullies, the Flyers, of hockey. So incredibly successful. So I took Ed's call, and he was on the phone with another man, Earl Foreman, whose name I knew from the part owner of the Eagles, brother-in-law of Ed Snyder, and owner of the Virginia Squires of the ABA, and famous for bringing Julius Erving into pro basketball.
Sure.
So I took this call, and they started talking to me about wanting to Americanize soccer. And they said, we'd like you to come in, and we'd like to talk to you about how the media will react to it. I said, guys, I don't have to come anywhere. I'll tell you right now, they'll totally ignore you. And, of course, they said, why? And I said, because sports editor, nobody really likes soccer. They're forced to cover the cosmos because of the celebrity aspect of it. And they were getting 77,000 people a game. But anywhere else, nobody will cover it. They won't. They'll push back against it so far. So that's all I can tell you. Well, come on in, talk to us a little bit. So I went in, I talked to them, and I said, guys, I got to go. I'm covering the Nets tonight, and I had to go back up to Trenton, and I took a nap. And I'll never forget it because it was Friday the 13th, October the 13th. It was my birthday. So I go in, I catch a quick nap, the phone rings, and it's Ed again saying, all excited, it's got our sixth franchise, sixth city, and we really want you to join us. I said, join you at what? I got to cover the Nets tonight. So, forward-looking thinker that I was, I talked it over with my then wife, and this is going to fold, within a year. Probably 3/4 of the people you speak to have, were in folding leagues that were happening in that era. So this was going to go down the drain like all the other alphabets. And I figured, I was a pretty good reporter, a little better editor. I'll get another job. Although, as we know, that's when newspapers really started folding. There were 4 in Philadelphia a year or two before, and now suddenly there were 2. So I went. It was October 15th. I went into the sports editor and said, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave. And he told me to leave then, forget 2 weeks. So I started Monday and started on this incredible odyssey of starting a brand new sport, a brand new professional league, in 1978. So it was October 15th. There were 4 of us, Earl and Ed, and a soccer guy named Dr. Joe Machnik. He was the U.S. national team goalkeeper coach. He was a former University of New Haven soccer coach, very successful. Brilliant guy, great guy. I think you've had him on.
Now Hall of Famer, National Soccer Hall of Famer.
Absolutely, that's right. And I just heard from him a little while ago. And so thank goodness there was a soccer guy in the room. So we just made things up. We had one thing that we said, it's got to fit in a 2-hour window for television. So we built everything around it. And, of course, it was indoors, and it was in a hockey rink. And, yes, we put down AstroTurf, although sometimes I thought, wow, it would be pretty cool, to just do it on the ice. That would have added a little dimension. But so we had that, and things would happen like we were just making up the rules, and I never kicked a ball in my life. And not really, it wasn't a rule that I would make up, but I would make up like how the game should be played. And then I wrote it, and I put it down into a form that is still used today, which that's amazing to me. 40 years ago. This was 40 years ago. And we would get a call, a guy who was an intern at the time, called from Pittsburgh, and now he's a big guy with an agency and everything, Paul Garofalo, and he said, I can't find the paperwork. There were no emails then. It was teletype. and snail mail. I can't find it. What's the size of the goal? And I know we hadn't decided yet whether we're going to make it tall, long, how was it going to be? It had to fit into the boards. So I went into Dr. Joe's office and I said, okay, time to decide on the goal. And I'm standing in the doorway, and he looks. He said, "You're about 6'2". Let's make it 6'6" by, God, I don't remember, maybe 12. I think it was 12 feet wide." And I got back on the phone and I said, "Oh yeah, here it is, 6'6" by 12." And that was it. So every day we had calls like that, and we had 6 franchises. The method was we went to the arena. Earl and Ed had a background with the Spectrum in Philly, which of course was 5 years around that time. 5 years in a row was deemed the number one arena in America, and Ed Snyder. So they'd go to buddies in different cities, say, "Here's an idea. We'll give you maybe 12 dates." I think we played 24 games the first year. We're going to have television. We'll have local television. Find us an owner. So they did. So it was Philly, New York, Nassau Coliseum, Pittsburgh, the old Igloo Civic Center, Cleveland, out in Richfield, Houston, the Houston Summit, and Cincinnati. I think it was Riverfront Arena, the Cincinnati Kids. 10 guys, including Pete Rose, put in $100,000 for that team. And we had ownership, and we were starting December 22nd. And, oh, my God.
Well, let's back up for a second. Before we get to the beginning of that, where does the idea of indoor soccer originate? Where does it come from? Because I think some of your work prior to that was a bit of an unwitting stepping stone to that, right? With the Philadelphia Atoms of the old
Philadelphia Atoms. Oh, Tim, I've been trying to forget that for 40-some years.
Well, we can't forget that, not here on the show.
I know. You won't let me. And that was an incredible thing, too. I did get into it before. I guess I was between jobs. I must have been before the Inquirer. Oh, I don't even remember. But I do remember it was 1976, the bicentennial year, a huge event in Philadelphia, multi-millions of dollars spent on infrastructure. I lived at the time 2 blocks from the Liberty Bell and Convention Hall. That whole area is going to be a big event. And 2 years earlier, in 74, the Philadelphia Atoms were born, the NASL, the old NASL, and they won the league championship in their first year. I'm now in Las Vegas, where the Golden Knights, the Vegas Golden Knights, have won their division, and they've set all kinds of first-year records, and they're the best, rookie franchise ever. But I know that the Philadelphia Atoms won that first year. The second year, they didn't do as well, and the construction guy who owned them folded them. The NASL found a group of 5 professional teams in Guadalajara, Mexico. There are 5 Division I teams. Guadalajara, very, very similar to Philadelphia in size and education and hospitals and medicine and things like that, history. So the 4 of the 5 teams banded together, having seen the U.S. Olympic team in 1974, which wasn't very good. And so banded together, said, we'll put our players together, we'll go up there, and we'll win the professional league in America. That was their idea in 1976. So Ed Tepper, that's how I met Ed 2 years before, he called me and said, we just met, and I interviewed with him under the stands in Franklin Field, old University of Pennsylvania Franklin Field, and about doing some PR for him at that time. And he sent me to Dallas. He needed a representative for the PR meeting, so I said, yeah, I'll go. And, well, I guess there I became the PR director. and of this team of owned by Mexico. So I came back, and they gave us our schedule opened on Easter Sunday, which was, of course, horrible. Then we played on Mother's Day, July 6th, but it was Bicentennial Week. That was horrible. It was just terrible. So I don't like to say, but I do like to say, because it's funny, I think we were the worst franchise in the history of American professional team sports. Why? Well, we were in dead last place. It was just terrible. Although we did beat the Cosmos in New York in front of a big crowd, and Pele called it the most exciting game he ever played, because we scored a goal to tie it with 2 minutes left and scored a goal to win it in sudden death overtime a minute into overtime, and at that time nobody else ever played sudden death overtime. So Pele said, "This is the most exciting game I've ever played." And we had one big crowd, and it's when it is when Pele came back to Philadelphia to play that game. We lost that one. So we lost. We were last place. The poor muchachos from Guadalajara were playing on AstroTurf. That was, just terrible. They played the, South American style of ping, 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 passing it around. The NASL at the time was an English league, which was over the head and power, and, they just got knocked all around. They were a group of 15, 16 guys put in 3 crummy apartments in South Philly. The food was bad. They weren't with their family. It was just horrible. We had no money for marketing. We had nothing. There were 3 people on the staff. We drew Bupkis to 60,000 seat Franklin Field on the bicentennial game that we had, or July 6th, I think it was. I announced the attendance at 1776. It was actually a little bit more, but I figured, well, that's a great number. So I had to be the first guy in history to take off numbers instead of, elevate the number when you announce attendance. It was horrible. There were a lot of fun things about it. But the thing that made us worse than anybody else, because there's been other horrible last place teams, no attendance, all of that, is no one on the team spoke English, and we were in Philadelphia. So I learned Spanish. That was pretty good. And they dissolved at the end of the year. The poor guys went back. Only one player ever played professional soccer again in Mexico. They went back in disgrace. It was really a shame because they thought they were going to win, of course.
Well, what do you think? I mean, what did you think? I mean, this is interesting to me. Having been a fan of the old NASL for some time and sort of coming of age around that time, actually, this is an interesting story that I've never really sort of heard about before. I wonder what was going through Commissioner Phil Woosnam's mind at the time, right? I mean, this is actually almost a prelude to, the experiment that was Chivas USA in the 90s and early 2000s in Major League Soccer, right? Where I can't imagine. It must have been some level of desperation, I guess, by Woosnam to keep a franchise in Philadelphia, given the fact that there were new markets in San Jose and Portland and Seattle and a lot of growth and stuff. I guess this was a sort of a last ditch effort, he says, for stability, despite a new ownership and just frankly to get a team fielded for another year.
Remember, they had won the championship 2 years early, and of course in Philadelphia in 1976 percolated some energy. Bobby Rigby, who was from Philadelphia, was the goalie. They were on the cover of Sports Illustrated, so they had a little something going. And the biggest difference between Chivas and what we did in Philadelphia, well, first of all, many years, 30, 40 years, and the growth of soccer in America, but they were in Southern California, close to a bigger Hispanic, audience or population in Southern California, we were like, if we suddenly put an NBA team in Reykjavik, Iceland, it probably wouldn't draw, ice cubes. So I think I think you're absolutely right. It was a huge amount of desperation, which was always the case in the NASL, and frankly, my judgment is the case in every one of these leagues that you put your spyglass on to. It's always desperation. In MISL, when the season was over, I know personally we go through like a little mini depression. The season's over. Is there going to be another season? How many people are going to keep their jobs? Who's going to have jobs? What's going to happen? We never knew what was going to happen. It was always desperate times. So yeah, that was the same thing.
So you went back to sports writing then, I guess, and
I did 76. First of all, I did say to Ed after the second week, Ed, why are we doing this? So he said to learn about soccer and about soccer people. He never mentioned the indoor soccer. Although, when the players from Mexico got off the plane, South Philadelphia, we immediately took them to the Spectrum, where, this was before 3 weeks before the season, where we played an indoor soccer game against, I don't even remember who it was against. It was a team from Washington, but I don't know. It wasn't the Diplomats. It might have been. I don't remember. So we marched them into a locker room there, and they thought this was their training facility. We didn't tell them any different. But we took them out before the game, kicked the ball around on this AstroTurf again, which they had never seen, and then we handed out some uniforms, and they suddenly got the idea that there was a game, that we were playing a game, and they said no. We don't know how to play. We don't know what to do. And everything. So I went in and kind of had their return, what they thought were their return tickets, and started ripping them up. And they used to call me Loco Berbo, which was Verb, but also I had a full beard at the time. So they went out and played, and of course they loved it. They loved playing it, and they won, And we had a little bit of a crowd there. I don't remember, but it was 4,000 or 5,000 people, probably more than we ever had, except for the big Pele game. So we did play some indoor soccer, and that was the idea, to see how fans, reacted, and to see how people and players and all of that stuff. So what it did for us, that one horrible, incredible experience, taught us we don't like outdoor soccer, and we don't want to be involved with that, and soccer people were purists and all of that. So yeah, then I did go back to writing some at the Inquirer for a while. I was the South Jersey sports editor, so I did that for a while, and then I went on to Trenton. We're out of order here, but I don't have any of this written down.
No, this is great. No, but I think it's important just to go back to that experience, right? Because and as aficionados will know, there was even an actual indoor exhibition at the Spectrum 2 years prior to this.
Against the Red Army
from Russia, right? So. Right. I guess it's good backdrop for what ultimately became that call when you get tapped. Maybe in the middle of the night, I don't know. It seems full of intrigue from Messrs. Tepper and Foreman. Where we pick up the story. So, how do you get ensnared? How do you get dragged into this fledgling major indoor soccer league, especially given the pro soccer experience that you had just literally gone through the year prior, I guess, in '76?
Well, as far as that's concerned, I'm like a defensive back. I have a very, very short memory. Now, at my age, I just have a bad memory. But I forgot about that. It was something new and different, and I was an idiot. Why would I leave, a good job covering whatever I was covering? But it's the pioneer in me, which I found out later on, which sometime, maybe 5 hours from now, we'll get to the other things that I've done. But I found out over the years that some people will go out and do different things, and whether they never think that it's going to fail, they think it's going to be successful and unique and just to be different and all. And they have that spirit about them. Lewis and Clark, Armstrong, whatever it is. There's some people, and then there's a whole lot of people who would never do that. They would never think of doing something that they're not getting, knowing that they're getting a paycheck every week or every other week. It's just the way you are. And I happen to be extremely fortunate to have had these opportunities just to be in some place where some guys decided that they wanted to Americanize soccer because soccer was the number one sport all over the world. And most Americans were closed-minded to think, well, they're calling this the Baseball World Series. It's not the World Series. It's not, they're playing baseball in other places around the world. But we were provincial and, empirical, is that the right word? Where we would think ours is the only thing. So Ed and Earl saw that there was something to soccer and that it was going to grow. And it was growing, even in the 70s. These kids, when they grow up, they're going to be big fans. It never happened. It still hasn't happened. So that's why I got into it. And I thought it would fold in a year. But it was just an awesome, incredible experience to be able to start that thing. And then Earl was such a genius to know the way, having gone through the ABA experience, which also had to be similar. Of course, it was his money, but it had to be similar. Where they had, guys would come in and want to be, the owner and think that they were NFL or baseball owners. So Earl had this idea that he would send Joe Machnik and I out when we got a new franchise, and we went from 6 the first year to 10 the second year, and he would send us into a new franchise area for whatever it took to get the franchise rolling and to, most importantly, be sure that what Earl used to call the brother-in-law effect. And sure enough, I'll give you an example. I go into Wichita. We used to call them our Green Bay Packers, in Wichita, owned by a good guy who had big hat, lots of money, I think oil money. And so after the announcement and all of these big pro sports coming to Wichita, they left me there with this guy, and so we're talking, and Joe Machnik was there too. And we said, so what's your thoughts about who you're going to have run the team? Oh, I got it covered. My brother-in-law, I just cracked up as soon as the guy said that. And Joe kicks me under the table. And Joe was a player, so when he kicked me, it hurt. And the guy said, my brother-in-law has been involved in soccer here for quite a few years. He's going to be our general manager. So I said, well, how was he involved? Oh, he was with the youth teams, and he coached his sons and daughters. So immediately I thought, what would Earl say? And Earl would say, that's wonderful, and he'll be, I'm sure, a great season ticket holder for you. But we have professionals here. Joe, would you give him, I think his name was Becker, will you give Mr. Becker the list of professional coaches who can serve as coach and general manager? And that's the way, the very first one we did, and I'm thinking, and Joe and I look at each other and say, oh, Earl, he was such a genius. And Earl's off, we were in Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania. And Tim, I may have tried this on for you, but quick little trivia question aside to break up all this monotony. What two professional leagues had their headquarters in Bala Cynwyd, BALACYNWYD, pronounced Cynwyd, a Welsh word, had their headquarters in Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania? Which two?
Well, I know one of them is the Major Indoor Soccer League. Okay, got that one.
What a guess.
But you got me on the second one.
Wow. Well, I will give you a hint and say this will not be, I don't think, you'll never have someone from this league on your podcast. In other words, because you only deal in the dearly departed. So it was the NFL. Bert Bell, and I say that thinking, well, 30 years from now he might. Bert Bell, who owned the Eagles and was the first commissioner and headed up the league, he had an office in Bala Cynwyd, which is right on the city line of Philadelphia, right by Villanova, V for Villanova. Good for them. Hate him as a Temple guy, but good for them. So we were in Bala Cynwyd. But Earl's office was like outside of Washington. So speakerphones were just, a new thing then. So Earl would yell and scream at all of us. He was like a maniacal genius. He was on that fine line between everything. And we always had to be by the phone. So that's what I did. So you can imagine I went into places. Then I was fortunate to go. I did St. Louis, but that was a short one because Ben Kerner, who brought the St. Louis Hawks to St. Louis, he was the owner, and he was older and all crusty old guy. But so he knew he had a pretty good idea, and St. Louis was another big, huge soccer area. So that was pretty good. And Stan Musial was one of the owners, and I got to spend a lot of time with him. An absolute saint of a man, and wherever he walked in St. Louis, people got up and applauded him. It was really something. So there wasn't a whole lot I had to do there. I spent 2-3 days there. As a little aside, one of the days there, I got a phone call from Terry Lewicki, who was the kind of co-director, I guess, in Houston, and the guy who literally built the goals, the first goals that we used, in a trial thing in Houston. He called me and said his little brother was looking for a job. He had been in insurance and did really well, was in the $1 Million Club or whatever. So would I interview him? So I said, sure. And it turned out to be Tim Lewicki, who has been one of the biggest guys internationally, a huge name in sports and the sports business for years now. So I'm proud to say that I kind of gave him his first job, along with many, many others that are in the business. So that gave me, going from market to market to, I'm a sports writer. Was that a curveball you hit? How does it feel to cover, Julius Erving, to learning about all this business? I knew accounting. I got A's. The only A's I ever got in college were in accounting. I got out of business when I had to take economics. That was a foreign language. So I didn't know anything about business or the business of sports, which was really kind of in its infancy to what we know now. But I got my master's by going around to city and to seeing everything. I also learned television because I was at every game, so I helped produce. And one time, the production people couldn't get into Buffalo, and we had a game, and the same Terry Lewicki, who was the television committee, said, I'm going on air, you're going to direct. I said, I don't know how to direct. He said, you'll know what, there's 4 cameras, you'll know what looks good, you've seen every game. And I did it, and it was fine, and I don't know who was watching, but just one more piece that I got to do.
Were you and Terry and I'm guessing Kyle Rote Jr., were you guys doing the first season of the New York Arrows games on Channel 11 in New York? Those games that were taped till late at night?
WPIX, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll raise my hand. I was the one watching those shows. Okay, I was babysitting local kids in the neighborhood, and sure enough, at 11 o'clock on a Friday night, there was this sort of, it's hard to describe, and people watching television back in the late 70s, right? At 11 o'clock at night, it's on tape delay. The game was run, I guess, earlier that night, and this bright green emerald carpet just literally just popped across the screen. And what was this frenetic thing? This red ball and these colorful uniforms and stuff. And I was, I fancied myself as a Cosmos fan at the time, outdoor. This was like a drug almost. You couldn't take your eye off of it.
Yeah. It was great. Boy, you just reminded me of another story, and of a man who did the play-by-play of that. Oh, he was just like, he did some network stuff, but he was big in Washington, big in I think he did a lot of New York stuff. I can't think of his name.
You're not talking about Al Troutwig, are you?
No. Al was much younger, and we gave Al his first gig. And that was USA Network when we got on there with Kay Koplowitz's second or third year. But to go back during that October, December, one day Earl, and they'd say, go down to the Spectrum, the studio in the Spectrum, but first stop at Kitty City, which was a Toys R Us in Philadelphia, and pick up every kind of ball you can, different colors. And you're gonna throw them and roll them and kick them across a piece of AstroTurf in the studio there at the Spectrum to see which color was going to be our ball, because traditionally then the soccer balls were white. The NASL did put a little color into it, but they were white all over the world. So I did that, and I never. I was so naive and there was so much that I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. I never asked, well, why am I doing that? That's silly. I just went and did it. And then, kind of figured out, oh, yeah, well, this makes sense. So now I got it on videotape, if you will. And I went back and we threw it in the old 3/4-inch machine and looked them all. And without a doubt, the best color ball was a deep pink. And we kind of decided, nah, we can't have a pink ball. Just call us sexist. Not at that time, but we didn't. So the next best one was a reddish orange ball that kind of left a trail. And we were Major Indoor Soccer League, MISL. MISL, we already had named the program magazine, MISL Magazine, MISSLE. So there was a trail to this, and I piped up with, we'll call it Rocket Red. So I got to name a color. I mean, come on. Every once in a while I'll go to a Crayola box of crayons, and check, did they ever pick up that color? So that was great. I'm looking in my office at, here's another throwback, the 4-color separation. For you kids out there in the audience, whenever you wanted to make a color photograph, you had to separate the 4 primary colors. There's none of this digital stuff at the time. Then you smacked them all together, 4 pieces of film, and that gave you a color. So I'm looking at that in my office. So, yeah, you're right, it popped. And when you saw it on television, you almost stood back and said, wow. Now you would say that about video games. That's what happened. We were a video game before, literally video games. And in fact, and again, I'll take some credit for this, I got Sports Illustrated. I was actually, my job was to be the PR man. And so I was a PR guy of the league, and I got Sports Illustrated to come out and do a little short on us, and they called it human pinball, because inside, around the box, balls hitting off the side, you'd purposely shoot a little bit wide of the goalkeeper so it'd come right back into the slot, and you put it in the goal. So it was called human pinball. And it was great on television, and it fit in a 2-hour window. And we didn't have too many fights, although the ones we did were tremendous. And we had 2-minute penalties, and we called them man advantage instead of power play. And we had sudden death overtime, and not too often we did, but a lot of close games, because Joe Machnik trained the referees the right way. And we had 40% of the crowd were women, which were extremely high at that time. And why? Because it was a bunch of average-looking guys average-sized guys running around in their underwear, and with the lights and the music, and that was one of the biggest things that we did. We made these introductions of players into a show, and guys like Tim Lewicki did that in St. Louis and Baltimore and every place that he went, later Kansas City. then made it bigger and bigger and bigger, and people came for the show. And the truth is, if you're in an arena, no matter how many people are there, if you turn out the lights, people are going to go ooh and ah. And then you hit music and spotlights and tracer lights and all kinds of smoke and all kinds of things that we threw out there that the rest of the sports world said, you're making a travesty of this. You're making it like a circus. And we said, it beats the hell out of getting down on your hands and knees and begging people to come. And then, of course, a couple years later, you watched an NBC NBA playoff game and you saw Chicago Bulls and from North Carolina, 6'5", and they did the same thing in Chicago. So it became a thing. But that was one of the biggest pieces that we brought to professional sports.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true that the MISL at the time was very much breakthrough, and it's in many respects. And you can do the homework and check this out. It was, it certainly was the instigator for what is now just frankly commonplace in sports. But let me ask you this though: it sounds like and we had our previous conversation with Michael Minchell and with Dr. Joe Machnik. It almost feels like there, with Terry Lewicki, it almost feels like there was some like this, this unspoken advanced crowd. It almost feels like you guys were an advanced team, if you will, sort of being sent or deployed to markets either current and wobbly or potential and needing assistance, so to speak. It almost feels like it was like the family sort of going out to the franchises and sort of making sure that everything would be okay, or if not, needed to be turned around and become okay. Is that a fair assessment? It seems kind of interesting.
Well, we most definitely, and what Earl had us do with a brand new franchise was a precursor to that. It was like predetermined that these franchises were going to have trouble, of course. So we would go out in advance, and we tried to help franchises. One of the things that in my time in other sports, but I was always amazed about how you go to a league meeting and you'd sit in there with all the marketing directors, all the PR directors, different meetings, and nobody would share anything. And it was like, wait, guys, the guys on the field are competing. And let's face it, they got to do well for you to do well. But you have to have the platform set up. So let's share these things. If your colleague in Pittsburgh folds, that's going to weaken you. The edict of pro sports is you're only as strong as your weakest link. And then it starts, a steamroll effect where franchises are dropping out. You don't know who's in, who's out. You don't know about ownership every year. So we did that. We I don't know that we didn't actually have an advanced team, but we worked a lot together. Terry Lewicki, he didn't really have the television rights in many cities, but what he did was while he was working for the Arrows and John Luciani and Bernie Roden, he kind of created his own little production company. So he would go out and he would help teams with their telecast, and had the benefit of course, first of all, the experience. But then also the benefit of having footage, so he could show little highlight packages of other games from earlier in the week, and he helped teams get on in their local markets. And it was before the days that regional sports markets, RSMs, were the thing. People, the sports visions of the world, were still trying to carve out a niche. People paying for their television program? Come on, that'll never work. And, that was just starting to happen. It was still the PIX and the UHF stations, WPHL in Philadelphia, that would carry sports, and you had somewhat of a chance. And Terry would go in and would help the local ownership sell it in and then produce it for them. So in that way I continued to travel all over the place, and the league continued to grow, maybe too fast, maybe not, but we, owners right away find out that they're not going to make money. It's how much money can they lose. This isn't the NFL. Not that the NFL, well, the NFL was making money then, but the other leagues really weren't. So, and we, encroached on a number of cities, their hockey and their NBA teams. We were, just as big in some of them. We were outdrawing some of them. And there were tough times for the NBA and the NHL at the time. So we made a bit of an impact. But we also had Earl did all this. Ed kind of dropped off. At one time, he took the rights that he had to a franchise and opened up the New Jersey Rockets and didn't fare very well there at all. I think it was 1 year.
Be careful now. You're talking to, and I think we mentioned this on the phone previously, you're talking to one of the actual only season ticket holders to the New Jersey Rockets that did not even last a full season. Yes. So that's a team that's near and dear to my heart. And perhaps if Mr. Tepper is still willing and able, we could talk about that one in another conversation. But let us not.
Okay, I cast aspersions. I know.
Fred Gugurev and Alan Mayer and Timo Likowski. We can go on.
I was just going to say Timo Likowski.
Yeah, sure.
And far be it from me to tell any tales out of school, but maybe one day Ed will pay off Timo's American Express bill. But that's another story for another time. I always did get paid. That's one thing. Not much. I learned later on, did I undersell myself? But not much. But it wasn't about the money. It wasn't ever about the money. It was always about the doing.
All right, just when it was getting interesting, let's bring this to a grinding halt, shall we? Just kidding. We got to pay the bills around here, and our friends at Audible have been very helpful in attempting to allow us to pay some of those bills, and we want to call them out now and remind you that a free audiobook download is yours for the taking, and also a free 1-month subscription to the service of Audible at audibletrial.com/goodseats. Again, audibletrial.com/goodseats for your free 1-month trial of the Audible service, and most interestingly, a free audiobook download for you to enjoy. 180,000 titles and growing every day to choose from, and there's absolutely no excuse to not find at least one title amongst that cavernous selection available to you that you won't find to be enjoyable and good for the soul, including a couple of books that might be interesting to our audience. And yes, some new ones, frankly, that I'm finally listening to. One that I'm listening to right now is by Carson Cunningham. It's narrated by Paul Bamer, and it's called Underbelly Hoops, Adventures in the CBA, a.k.a. the Crazy Basketball Association, which is really, of course, about the Continental Basketball Association, which for many years was sort of this ragtag minor league of the NBA. And it's a book I'm about 2 chapters into right now, and hopefully maybe a guest will get for a future episode. Also, in my queue, next up, is another guest that I'd like to get, and her book that she wrote is also narrated by her. Her name is Jeannie Buss, and of course, Jeannie is the daughter of Jerry Buss, of course, the wildly successful founder of the Los Angeles Lakers and the LA Forum, and Jeannie is clearly today the brains behind the Los Angeles Lakers today. She and her brothers were active, of course, in things like, along with her father, World Team Tennis, the Major Indoor Soccer League with the LA Lasers, all kinds of stuff. So her book is next on my list. That's called Laker Girl, and that too is available on Audible. And again, it's one of the many thousands of titles that you can choose from when you go to audibletrial.com/goodseats. And again, you too can get your free audiobook download to give it a try, perhaps one of those 2, or perhaps one of the other 180,000 titles available to you as well. Give it a try, audibletrial.com/goodseats. Thanks for listening, and back to our conversation. Let me ask you. I got 2 quick questions that I think that are related here on this front of the MISL. So number 1 is, when did you kind of know that you had kind of struck a chord or a nerve with a certain type of sports fan? Because Obviously, outdoor soccer in a number of markets, New York especially, but Tampa Bay and Seattle and San Jose. I mean, was and here you had this sort of indoor version of the sport, right? But obviously, after a few years, the roles were reversed, right? And indoor was really. So I'm curious as to when, like, at what point did you kind of know that you were really sort of onto some kind of ascendant sort of version of the sport? And then second, maybe related. And this is sort of related actually to some of our previous conversations in other sports and other leagues and teams. Why did Foreman and Tepper not perhaps think about this as a single entity versus a franchised kind of model in the beginning days where they could exert more control? Or was that never sort of the business model in their mind? Because we've heard time and time again from various people, if they could ever do these sort of new leagues over again, to start sort of with a central control and then sort of work their way into franchising. Two questions. Sure. Go ahead.
Well, you're making me laugh because I love, like, the rare times that I listen to talk radio and a caller calls in. So I've got two questions, and they never get two answers. They only get one answer, and usually it's the second question.
I'll remind you of the second one then. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. No, it's the first one you got to remind me of. So there were a couple of different times that I thought we've really got something here. Well, the very first week, Earl and I are flying from game. We had 6 different dates for our openers. And the third one, we did all right in Cincinnati, all right in Pittsburgh. I think that was the order. And the third one was Philadelphia, and we're hearing that they're selling tons of tickets. And we literally fly over, the Spectrum in the South Philly complex, and the airport's pretty close. We're flying over, and this might not be true at all, but I swear that I looked down and I saw like a line around the Spectrum for tickets. And it turned out that we sold it out. And in, my hometown, in Philly, that happening, it was like, oh my God, this is just amazing. And they didn't do much of a show really, but they had a great mascot. Socceroo was a great mascot, so he was really good, so they didn't have to do as much of a show. They didn't. So that was one time. When we went from 6 to 10 teams, and one of them was St. Louis, and they hit it really big. They did really, really well there. And with a unique, still to this day, I don't think ever match. They were literally a hometown team. 10 of the 6, we had 16 players on the roster. 4 of them could be foreign. Let's say 12 of them had to be American. So the 12 in St. Louis were all from St. Louis. Incredible. So you go to the old Checker Dome, and you'd see a whole section, and that was Sam Bick and Steve Petcher and Ty Kehoe. And then the 4 foreign guys were like just really good guys, good solid guys. Slobo Ilievsky, who's the goalkeeper. Carl Rose was a Canadian. He was a defender. The little guy. Oh, who was the little guy? I just had all their names in my mind. I was just about to say amazing. I remember them. Well, there were 4. One was a Scotsman, and there were 4. Tony Glavin, and 4 guys, and they were just taking in great big arms around these guys, and just welcome in, adopted, and you'd go there, and they were really hometown players. So that was the next time that I really, felt that we had something. We had USA came into it. We didn't get any money from it, but at least they won. We were their first sports that they had, and Kay Koplovitz had the idea. She was the president of USA Network, and she had the idea of, having sports and that would help the network. So seeing the way, an upgrade in production and the people doing the games and all of that was good. We did an all-star game at the Garden. We never had a team in New York City, but we did an all-star game there, and people from CBS, Bob Wussler, the president of CBS, was there and really loved it, and he got involved in it. So there were things there were more pluses than minuses, and you saw the minuses, you learned from them, But, you carried on. And then, of course, the question was about the comparison with the outdoor soccer. And, we were in, first we were in a fight with USFA, United States Soccer Federation, because, they didn't want us around. I don't think they feared us at all, but they just didn't want us around. They were losing control. We would have joined them, but they didn't want us around. It made us tough for our referees. We wanted to get quality referees, and they ostracized the referees. And they were full-time referees for us. I mean, it was only 4 months of the year, but they were still full-time. So they ostracized those guys who, were their top referees and would have worked a World Cup game somewhere in the world, and later on they let them back in. So that and the NASL, and they had their own league, and when we had our first couple of years, they came back and tried it. So then the next time I saw it, I was actually in the NASL. I went to Chicago after 5 years in the league office. I wanted to put into play what I learned, and I'd only go to a major market. And Chicago at the time was our biggest market in indoor soccer, our biggest market where people knew them. I mean, people didn't know the Arrows in New York or the Lasers in L.A. But in Chicago, because they won the outdoor championship in 81, the first championship in 17 years there, they knew them. They knew who this thing were. So I went there. Earl Foreman made a trade with Lee Stern, who was a commodities trader, and they traded the president of his name escapes me now to become the deputy commissioner of the MISL, and I went out there to become the president of the team.
Oh, wait a minute. So you actually executed a trade of front office folk between leagues that were kind of at each other's throats, especially in the indoor.
Well, no, but the trade was made. Oh yeah, you're right, because at that point we played the NASL. No, the Sting were already in the MISL and the NASL. So yeah, Charlie Avranian was his name. He went there as deputy commissioner. But let's not get carried away. There was no paperwork or anything like that. They just, it was our little joke because Lee was a commodities broker. So I always used to say that Charlie was nothing but a, bag of beans or something like that, some ham hocks. I don't know.
Before we get to the Sting, though, which obviously is its own chapter, I
want to tell you the difference is that when they folded, we in Chicago were very good outdoor and very exciting outdoor, but no one came to see us because they had already had a taste of indoor soccer. So we won the championship in 1984, and we were playing both. It was year-round. Logically, it made sense. You paid the players year-round contract. You had a staff. 1 + 1 should have equaled 2. It didn't. It equaled -1. In strange sports business math, it was bad. There was no time to breathe. Your fans didn't know where you were playing, when you were playing, what sport you were playing. The staff was just dead. It's amazing I have any hair left. And the players were like, it was too much for them too. And then we went to the championship game. So 3 weeks before our indoor started in MISL, we played the championship game in Toronto. We won. Frankly, I couldn't even tell you who we played. I honestly, I don't remember. It was so inconsequential. And the day after we won, the NASL folded. So that, of course, was a time where I said, wow, now we have no other soccer, even though all that time I had been saying, we don't have any soccer competition. The purists used to say to me, wow, the fans won't like this. I said, what fans? You don't have any fans. They didn't have any fans, the NASL at the time. So that was a big time, too, when I saw things happening they could really, continue. But on the other side, I also saw lots of franchises dying, teams moving, a couple guys Dr. David Schoenstatt, I think, at one point owned 3 franchises. Never good. And they were good ones, too. Baltimore, Kansas City, they were the best franchises because the Lewickis were running them. So there were pluses and minuses, and eventually the minuses win out. And Earl would be tough about not just letting anybody into the league. You write a deposit check and you're in the league because we need another team. That didn't happen. We had good people, but good people run out of money, run out of interest. Owners, I learned quickly, they're the worst thing about pro sports. They're successful businessmen with big egos, and when they get into pro sports, whether it's a toy or not, they have unrealistic expectations, and their business acumen and their morals go flying out the windows. They forget all about those things and do stupid things and all that. If you run a franchise, and it's still true today, but back then for sure, you run a franchise, your number one job is managing ownership's expectations. And that can be just impossible sometimes. So they were some of the touchstones. I'm sure I've forgotten many of them. And in every different market, there were different things happening that were good and bad and all. But they had to all grow. You've got to grow at the same time. It's so hard to do. And you're in your own little bubble. It really doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. The economy matters, of course, but it doesn't matter what the other teams are doing in a market because they're all there. They were there when you got there. I'm talking about the major teams. They're there when you leave. So you just have to do your own thing and keep carving out your own niche and keep pounding on doors and finding the ones you want. It helped, as I mentioned, about 40% women. That was a big help. You can grow a fan base. With that, they don't have to play. You went for youth soccer. Yeah, that was important. You played, youth soccer games on the carpet for 5 hours before you played your game to get people in there. Yeah, you did all that. Played in major arenas all over the place. They were expensive. They helped us out. They gave us breaks on different things. When I got to Chicago Stadium, the deal that I had there was just unbelievable. Because they wanted us to succeed. They wanted us to turn on the lights. Well, so that was that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
What was the second question?
Well, I was going to get to the whole franchise versus single entity thing, but let me sort of roll with you on this one. So, I mean, it does seem, though, that, in the early 80s, right, this is really the momentum around outdoor soccer really started to leave the building, so to speak, and indoor really became the thing for soccer, and to the point where, and you mentioned the collapse of the NASL, we'll get to that in a minute, but that the only game in town circa 1985 post NASL dying was the indoor game, and in some respects, right? So you look back in time and go, well, those were dark days, quote unquote, for soccer. Well, hell no, actually, it was you had captured lightning in a bottle. The sport of soccer played in a more perhaps Americanized and exciting style. I think there are some real nostalgists out there that look at, the rumblings of, futsal and whatever, the major arena soccer league, which is hardly major if you look at some of the facilities they're playing today. But, there was quality sport in the MISL at that time. And it was, for a period of time, the only soccer game professionally, literally in town. To me, it almost seems like you'd almost created a monster, so to speak, in what, at least on some levels, was a very successful product in a lot of markets.
Well, that's true. Unfortunately, it wasn't a monster. It was a death by many cuts. It wasn't a monster. And actually, I would turn around what you said. The NASL, outdoor soccer, professional soccer, as we knew it, died in the early 80s, and we were the ones who had momentum that was a little more positive. So, yeah, but you're absolutely right. And, in fact, to that end, something that I shared with you on the phone that I'm strongly considering, and I have the feeling I made some commitments today that we are going to do a 40th anniversary of the start of MISL this December here in Las Vegas and have a reunion. And I've started speaking to some people who are documentarians who are hooked by the very idea of the only soccer in America in the mid-'80s. And that's what we were. And it really was a different, a different form of it, very much so. Yeah, that's what was going on then. And again, remember, I wasn't a soccer guy. So to me, it was something different than soccer. It was exciting. And listen, I did how many? It seemed like 18 years. So I guess total I did 3 years of outdoor soccer. And of course, I respected what the game and what was played, and I learned how great, like a great pitcher's duel, how great a 1-0 soccer game could be, and the flow and the build-up and the different styles and the nuances. I learned them, and it was like, I love all kinds of sports, so it was all great. I don't quite understand curling, but, that was, which is huge here in Las Vegas. Believe it or not, curling is big in Las Vegas. They just had, or they're having, the national championship. They do very, very well here every year. Who knows? So I got to get my broom some way. I'm not sure. But so all the other sports, it's the same stuff. It doesn't matter whether they wear shoulder pads or, shin guards. So I did come to really love that. And the great thing all the time for me with soccer was the international scope of it, and the people that I met. And on that Sting team, I think we had 13 different nationalities on that team. It was great talking to these guys, coming together. Why you were a pretty big time pro in Germany? Why would you come here? To play soccer. How else am I going to get here? That was the answer.
Any names that come to mind?
Well, of course. I mean, everyone from Karl-Heinz Granitza, who he was the franchise in Chicago. Ingo Peter, a defender who was, I think, played on their national team at some time. Arno Steffenhagen did not play indoor soccer when I was there, but he was very highly regarded as a person and as a player. But there were many of them. Sanino was a wing who played on some of those big Cosmos teams. He was from Portugal, and he was just the ultimate gentleman. And he played, and even played. It was a little tough for him indoor soccer, because he was a slight guy, and he was a little older by that point. But it was great. Franz Mathieu was from Haiti, and that was the time in the 80s when AIDS was rampant and all over in America, and many people thought that it started in Haiti. And here was a guy that was loved. He was in that 81 Sting NASL team that won, and he was just the stalwart of the defense. Strong as could be, with a big bright smile, and the people are saying, "Oh, stay away from him. He's from Haiti." So it was, lots of them. Some guys from Chile, all over. And even my first year, I make fun of Los Alamos in 1976, but what an experience traveling around with those guys, and they knew what they quickly realized what they were in for. Let's have fun. We're here. So we had fun in a lot of places when we would travel. I could tell some great stories about that. But, so that's the beauty of soccer, really unlike any other sport, except maybe now basketball. You look at the NBA, I think it's a third of the players are foreign born, maybe more. And they're damn good players, and they can play. So,
were there any unique challenges to marketing the Chicago Sting in the city of Chicago? I mean, was Lee Stern a help or a hindrance? You clearly had a number of different locations to play your games, especially on the outdoor side. I mean, it was almost like bingo cards. in terms of like what week and what stadium you were going to be playing. And just curious as to what your experience was generally like marketing one team in Chicago, especially one that had just won its first major championship in '81, and you had that sort of behind your in your sales.
Right. And way to throw a good leading question with the Lee Stern aspect. I could start there for sure. I got there in October of '82, so they had already played the '82 season, having won the '81 season, and frankly, they sat there and waited for the phone to ring, and it didn't ring. So they had no bump from the '81 win, which was during the baseball strike. You know, if you asked right now 20,000 people, did you go to a Sting game, or better yet, did you go to the championship, which was somewhere else? I'll bet you they'd have 20,000 people say, oh yeah, I was in Toronto for that. They had a huge crowd. I want to say 47,000 at Comiskey for the one of the playoff games. So, but they didn't improve anything after that. So I got there they had considerably a bad year, a down year compared to the year before. And I was really marketing two teams, an outdoor and an indoor, and I wanted to do good outdoor. It wasn't that I was against that. I figured that's, you play what's in front of you. The calendar says there's a game July 15th. It's an outdoor game. You have to market it. It was very hard to do with not much money. Indoor, I got to say this. When I look back, and it's many years now, I should have fought more for staff and for education, which wasn't really available then. Now it is. Now, you can go, and the MLS has a wonderful program where they teach people how to sell tickets. And then those people, when they graduate, have all these teams to pick from. And that's the best entryway into pro sports. We didn't have that then, but I could have done more of that. I could have fought more for staff. I could have shown how, give me X number of dollars for staff, and it'll mean this much that we'll take in. We didn't do a lot of things that we would now, without a doubt. So it was, and that's really a regret. Lee Stern was everything that was good about soccer in Chicago and everything that was bad about soccer. He owned the Sting, I think it was just a shade under 20 years. I estimate he lost probably $25 million all by himself. He bought the first championship in 17 years. He had early on, he had coaches and general managers stealing from him. He maybe to this day doesn't even know about, because they would play a game they would make a deal for a player in Europe, buy a player in Europe. The general manager in Europe would get a piece, and his guy would get a piece in Chicago. And so he had a lot of that. You're right. We played in Wrigley, Comiskey, and Soldier Field. We played our indoor games at the stadium. My last year or so, I started working with Rosemont Horizon to bring a couple games out there, very good arena, in the suburbs, as opposed to, on the west side, a tough west side of Chicago. Suburban soccer people maybe wouldn't come in there. So it was all over the place. The Cubs didn't want us in Wrigley. Comiskey put up with us because Lee was a part owner. And Soldier Field was a city, but it was, huge. And you couldn't get any kind of atmosphere there because of the bowl, the way the bowl was, and uncovered and everything like that. So we played in front of, you didn't even know that there were people there. And we played very, very good outdoor soccer, exciting, high-scoring games. Willie Roy, who was the coach In indoor soccer, you have to coach some. It's not just throw your players out there, train them well, whip them into shape. There's no plays in outdoor soccer. In indoor soccer, there's nuances. There are hockey nuances, some basketball nuances. Players have to come on and off. In outdoor soccer in those days, it was an insult. If you took a player off the field sometimes, off the pitch, they would undo their shoes and walk in right into the locker room. They didn't even stay and watch the rest of the game. Indoor soccer, 2 minutes, big boy, you're all. Karl-Heinz wouldn't come off the field. He just wouldn't. And he only played one end of the field. And in indoor, you had to play both sides. Outdoor, you don't. You have to learn to go in one door and come out the other. We would get killed with that. And Willie would not learn any of it. Even after we stopped playing outdoor, and even after he knew he had the best talent in the league, maybe up there, arguably the best talent, and he would not win as much as he should win. And certainly we never won in the playoffs. And he wouldn't learn it. So, and I had nothing to do with the players at all. One player I helped on his contract, Prato Marhetic, who was one of these guys that when he touched the ball, indoor and outdoor, you got out of your seat. He was a magician. So I helped with that contract. I got him, we had a jeans company that was and Marshall Fields and the jeans company got together, put in some money for his contract to keep him in Chicago. It's the only one I ever did. And, Lee would yell and scream at the referees. He once reached over not over the glass, but the opening in the glass to grab at one of the referees. Him and Willie would bitch and moan at them. My first MISL game there, they just started. They think for sure that they were jobbed by the referees because they just got into MISL and all that. And I'll never forget them walking down after bitching to the media, and we had some good media coverage there. The Tribune, the Sun-Times, and the TV stations, radio stations, they covered us, which was great. They were just up in arms with the referees, and this is your first game in a new league. And I'll never forget them walking down the hall, and I said, guys, referees, they're human too. And they both turned around simultaneously and said, no, they're not. So I said, this is going to be a real issue. So Lee did a lot of bad things. He would literally call an editor. He'd be right down there at the Tribune, and sometimes mostly pulling papers off of the machine, off of the printing press to see where the story was, calling up editors in the middle of the night. And one time I said to him, Lee, those guys, I'm talking to you from a former sports writer here. When you call an editor and wake him up at night, he's not too happy about you telling him that a comma's out of place or something like that. And he really looked at me and said, well, what do you mean? I said, Lee, I won't, just part of the body that you sit on. Basically I called him an ass. I said, Lee, they think you're an ass. And he was dumbfounded. No one had ever told him that. And I was thinking, who sat in my chair before? And Lee was not a guy that would come in. He never ranted and raved at me, and I don't think he did it any of the guys that preceded me. But no one ever told him. I mean, some guys you work for you wouldn't dare tell, but they never did. Not that stopped them, but it calmed them down a little bit with some of those things. But maybe it was too far gone by then.
Well,
so it was interesting.
He was certainly we have an invitation extended to him and Kenny, his son, has been gracious to say yes as well. And we're hopefully going to get a conversation with him. He's based in Las Vegas as well. A lot of sting stories probably to be yet unearthed, but you got to give him an enormous amount of credit. I mean, quite the anomaly, right? In that he, began a franchise in the old North American Soccer League in the mid-'70s when, of course, nothing was assured successfully or otherwise, and was, by the late 1980s was still at it in whatever shape or form soccer was in at the time, the MISL in particular. If nothing, he was passionate, right? And
I said he was everything that was good about it.
Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt. But it was always, when you're everything that's good and everything that's bad, it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. 1 step forward, 1 step back. That's the way it always was. And it didn't have to be. I'll clearly remember when I think we were already out of outdoor soccer, saying to him, Lee, let's do, I did an all-star game, NASL All-Stars against the Sting. That was great. I mean, it was absolutely great. And all the big indoors, this was indoors, we had a big crowd. We did a dinner, everything that you would do, that the big boys did. And it was tremendous. And we made some money. It was unbelievable. We made some money. The place, the old Chicago Stadium, rocking like crazy. A lot of media attention. I'm sure we did some television somehow. And so I remember going to him and said, Lee, if we just did special events, meaning all-star games or international games, Chicago, second largest Polish population in the world, German population, okay? Then we had an incredible amount of camps and clinics that our players did, but they were our camps and clinics, and we sold merchandise because we had a good logo, and we corrected the mascot. We made the mascot really something. We had a great group of dancers that Taste the Honey who worked. They were a marketing team, and they did the the intros and halftime shows and all kinds of, and sold tickets too. So we had all of that going for us, and I said, Lee, let's just do this. If we got rid of the games, we would really, do well. And he said, so what am I going to do? Buy another big boat? So the money mattered, but mainly from a win and lose standpoint, success, non-success, not success, failure standpoint. So, he was tremendous what he did, and a well-meaning guy, for soccer should be in every soccer Hall of Fame there is in America, without a doubt. But it was very, 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 very tough. And he did it. He got involved. He had 3 sons, and 2 of them were, in his commodities brokers and did well, and they were good guys, good family guys. And then there was Kenny, who played soccer at SMU and was not like the other 2 boys, and this was Kenny's passion. So Lee bought him a team, basically. And Kenny was involved. I mean, he did radio for us, and he wasn't a nuisance in any way. And he was he was involved, and that's how Lee got involved and why he got involved, and spanned, I mean, what you just said, late 70s, what the NASL was at the time. And then, the Cosmos, they were fighting the Cosmos all the time. They'd have 6-5 games. It was great stuff. And then, what happened with outdoor, and then the indoor comes in, and I don't think Lee ever liked indoor because it was, he won an outdoor championship. I always remember him and Willie Roy saying, they'll never take that away from us. And I used to say to them, why do you think anybody wants to take it away from you? Nobody wants to take that away from you. The business is what the business is.
Okay, friends, sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to quickly remind you that today's episode of Good Seats Still Available is brought to you by our friends at Audible, the premier provider of digital audiobooks with over 180,000 titles to choose from in just about every genre you could think of. Audible titles play on iPhone, Kindle, Android, and more than 500 devices and MP3 players for listening anytime, anywhere. And for a limited time, my audience can listen to a free download of any book that they choose, as well as get a 30-day free trial when you go to audibletrial.com/goodseats. That's audibletrial.com/goodseats. And you can choose from over 180,000 titles, as we said, including one that I'm listening to right now. It's called The 10-Gallon War by John Eisenberg. That's the story of the NFL's Cowboys, the AFL's Texans, and the feud for Dallas's pro football future. Another one on my list, which I have yet to download but is on my queue, that could be interesting to our audience here, is called The National Forgotten League by Dan Daly, entertaining stories and observations from pro football's first 50 years. Those are just two of the many thousands of titles to choose from, and not just in sports history, but you name the genre that you might want to listen to, and Audible's got it. By the way, two guests perhaps that we'll have on the show, hopefully sometime soon. But again, go to audibletrial.com/goodseats for your free 30-day trial, as well as your free audiobook download to try it out for yourself. Again, that's audibletrial.com/goodseats. And now, back to our conversation. Yeah, well, let's go back to the mid-'80s then, or the mid to late 80s, right? So
okay.
Let's talk the Chicago Sting. So give me a sense of sort of, the sort of end of times, I guess, when it came to the Sting and or your work with the Sting, right? So I'm really curious as to sort of the beginning, I guess, of the end of what was, probably at that point, the longest lasting, consistent soccer franchise in the country, right? You're in the middle of all that, in the midst of all that.
Yeah.
That said, right, NASL has died, not ostensibly on your watch, right? The MISL is still powering along, but some cracks starting to surface, and obviously you have knowledge of how the beginnings of that league sort of got going. What did you see on the horizon? No pun intended, or perhaps pun. And what, I guess, thank you very much. And what how did you sort of process that career-wise? And what were you seeing at that time? Was it obvious or not so, or what?
Well, and that also can tail into your second question, which I do remember, about the idea of the single entity. And I've got to say that I don't recall that being brought up very much, if at all. Now, maybe Ed and Earl thought about that before and considered it and maybe tried it on some of the original owners. I don't know. I don't remember really ever hearing so much about that until, again, and we'll get to this in the 16th hour of this show, my arena football. We were a single entity in arena football. But as far as, the Sting, so I left, and it was time for me to leave. And again, looking back, I never did anything about the players. I didn't want to get involved in that. And I should have worked hard to get rid of Willie Roy. Because if we would have made the playoffs, we made the playoffs, but we always got knocked out in the first round, and, always disappointing end. We would have done gangbusters. We would have set records in revenue and in tickets and all, and we were doing pretty well. We were outdrawing the Blackhawks, and the Bulls, with that Jordan guy, had just started, picking up. We outdrew them in 82 and 83 and 84, I think. But I didn't do that. So life was miserable because I had, no staff. I kept having to cut it. And we should have had more. So... this is the indoor stuff, right? That was basically now indoor, and so at the very end that season, I decided I wanted to have an all-star game, a MISL all-star game. Back in the when I was in MISL, one of my things was to go into the city and produce the all-star game. So St. Louis, then it was Buffalo, then Cleveland, Kansas. I didn't do Kansas City. I was already with the Sting. But so that's what I did. In fact, I met my wife at the, she was going to work for me on the St. Louis one, which was just fabulous because of all the St. Louis players. So we did this All-Star game, and it was bigger than and better than the one that we did in the NASL, and it was fantastic. And it was in the middle of the year, and after we made $80,000 on total net for the 2-3 days festivities, and it was done very, very professionally. Again, just like the big boys. And Lee came in afterwards into the office, and I don't even remember what was going on with the team or anything like that. And he had tears in his eyes and to fire me, basically. And I said, you don't have to do that. I'm leaving. And I had, a lot of blood in the indoor game. And I looked around and I saw what was happening, and that depression and losing all these friends, good people who worked their hearts out, and ownership left, and they were just, out there. Some of them went to another city. Some of them, didn't have another job in sports. And that's, hard to take over time. Lee, I went on 1 week vacation, and Lee fired my marketing guy, who had brought in more money than anyone ever had in his organization, ever. And he fired him, and the guy did nothing wrong at all. So there was a lot of that stuff, and just said, okay, that's it. And I said, that's it about soccer. And I'm going to, just have to leave it, and I'll go, and I'm sure I can go and do something else. I'll find something. And by that time, newspapers had really died. So I was at the point where I was saying, boy, I really made a good choice, because it didn't work out. All my newspaper friends were trying to hook up with the Comcasts of the world, or the Yahoo Sports or things like that. So, yeah, it died. I left. Kenny Stern took over for me. I was, Lee asked me to stay for a month so Kenny could consult with me. And I'll never forget, when I got back, I had a vacation planned in Jamaica, so I went there with some friends and came back, and I was there Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Where's Kenny? Well, Kenny never quite got the concept of 9 to 5 jobs. Not that sports was, but it certainly started at 9 at least. I'll never forget sitting there, and of course the staff is all saying, well, what's he doing in here? And I wasn't in my office, I was in the conference room, just sitting there. Kenny finally comes in with his buddy, who was the Howard, I can't think of Howard's, did the play-by-play.
Howard Balson.
Howard Balson, right. There's another guy, Howard Balzer, who was a long time, maybe sporting news football writer, a guy in St. Louis, who I knew from Long Island because he used to cover the Arrows. And he's a big-time, national football guy. So, and I always get their names confused. So Howard, who was a prince of a guy, such a nice guy, but he, shepherded Kenny around because of the radio stuff. So they walk in finally, and I'll never forget Kenny or Howard saying, "Well, where's all your notes and your stuff?" And I said, and of course Kenny didn't even have a notebook. I said, Kenny, it's all in my head. I've lived this for years. I know this stuff. What do you need to know? Tell me. Ask me. I'll tell you. Now that went on for about half a day, and I don't know, Kenny lasted maybe 3 days. I mean, he still was the president of the team, but I don't think he did very much. The season dwindled on. Nobody did much. And next thing I know, I hear that Lee had taken a partner for the first time ever, a guy who owned I forget what it was called, but it was like merchandise, different little, the pens and all of those things, cup holders with your logo on it, that kind of stuff. Halo advertising. And he had made some good money, and he was a sponsor of ours. We used him and all that. So he took him in as a partner, a guy who used to be the VP of marketing for the Bulls took over running the team, and they announced that they were going to play all their games at the Rosemont Horizon. Okay, I wasn't going to do that. I was going to play a few, but they were going to play all of them. And unfortunately, what they didn't know, because they didn't know, was that the Rosemont Horizon, the floor was kind of, well, no, not the floor, but the seating when you got down, when you put up boards, when you got down to the bottom, the first few rows, which are, some people think, the best seats right on the glass, they were below the field level. So your eyes were kind of at field level. It wasn't good. And they, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I was not involved. I was looking, what am I going to do next? But they had no idea what they were doing, and it was.
Actually, a point of order here. So, didn't they or you, or maybe this was after when the subsequent minor league AISA Chicago Power came in. I think I remember clear plexiglass, right, where there were actually no boards, so that they could do that issue.
Yeah, well, that's what they had to do, but you were still sitting down low. It was, I know Vanderbilt. College basketball, even I think last night in San Antonio,
put it on
the
a
floor
stage.
Was, you're on a stage. Well, those first, it's like you were sitting where the players were sitting, but you had boards, and so the expense, what do you think the expense was of that plexiglass? That was something. It was horrible. It was bad enough that was it. Lee stopped. It folded. Cleveland was still solid. Kansas City was in a bad way at that point. And frankly, Tim, I walked away and didn't look back. And in fact, now that I'm starting to talk to people again about this reunion, I realize I had maybe 4 or 5 people that I've talked to over time. One guy who I was pretty friendly with for quite a while, John Kowalski, the coach at Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. We were friendly because we always wanted to do something again. When I moved here to Vegas, I wanted to bring a team here, and John was going to be my coach, and we'd do great. If you have that partnership, it's tremendous. So I didn't know so much what was going on, but I know it failed, and Lee was out. First time he takes a partner, boom, they were out. I can't imagine how much money they lost. I was I want to say first season there. It had to be after the first indoor season. Lee called me on the phone. Kid, I just put you into beans. I said, thanks, Lee. What does that mean? So he said, I bought you a unit of soybeans. So, I didn't tell why. He did. The numbers had come in, and I had lowered the loss. When I got there, the loss was $1.7 million. I had lowered it in a little over a year to $1 million. So he put me soybeans. So he said, "Don't worry, kid. They're not going to back up a truck and dump a ton of soybeans on your front door." So I said, "Okay, thanks for that." So I said, "Okay, thanks." He said, "You did great. The numbers came in. It's great, the stuff that you've done. I really appreciate it." Great. Next day he calls me, and the market closes at 2:30, so I knew that's when I would talk to Lee. And first I would talk to his account man, Al Goldberg. "Hey, how'd the market do today?" And Al would say, "Don't talk to Lee today." So that was my defining point. So Lee calls the next day, and he said, "Kid, you're out of the market." So I said, "Oh my God, I didn't even cook the beans." And he said, "Yeah, you're out. I put the money in your account." I didn't even know I had an account. I put the money. So I said, "Oh, what was it?" So he said, $5,000. So I said, "Can we do it again tomorrow?" So he said, "It's not that easy." So, and that's the way he treated me, which was great, and it was marvelous. And I was living the high life. I was making more money than I ever made. It wasn't enough. Had an apartment. We moved, bought a house or like a condo, 4 blocks from Wrigley Field. That was great. had a car, everything was great. It was the winter time. It didn't matter. Chicago was great. I had entree to everything. Bill Wirtz loved me. He bought a new carpet. Jerry Reinsdorf. I get a call one day. Mr. Reinsdorf would like to have lunch with you. I said, okay. So I go over. He was American Express. He ran American Express in Chicago. I go into his huge office, and first time ever, they brought this lunch in on white tablecloths, and we sit at a table, and we're talking, and I quickly realized this guy pities me for having to work for Lee. Because Lee was the old, was it, not called Sports Service. What was the one? Sports Vision was in New York, right? In Chicago, it was, not Sports Center. I forget what it was called, but it was they started the regional sports market. They took the White Sox, the Bulls, the Blackhawks, took their games off of WGN, most of them, made people pay for. Do you remember what that was called, Tim?
Yeah,
What was it? Sports.
It was called Sports Vision.
Well, what was in New York? There was something similar to that.
I think that was. Yeah, I know. I can see the logo. I can't remember that either, but I'll.
Well, Troutwig. That's where he really got his. Where he got his start doing that. But whatever. So that was terrible. Oh, there was such a backlash against. And the Bulls weren't that good, and the Blackhawks certainly weren't that good, and who really cared about the White Sox? And the Sting were the fourth team, and I think Lee had 10% of that whole thing. So they all had to, Lee was like a guy who sat there, and, these other guys, Reinsdorf, a brilliant guy, and Bill Wirtz, who was in the business forever, they would see the things Lee would do. I don't know if they ever talked to him, but definitely Mr. Reinsdorf pitied me, and he saw what I was trying to do. They just had to fold it. I guess he just had to fold it. He lost enough money. The league was going, and that was it. So I was going. I stayed another year. Kind of took it easy, looked around for some things. The interesting little side thing about me, the week or two after I left, and it was in the paper, I always did my best to stay out of the paper, even though, of course, I knew all the beat writers and everything, but I tried to stay away because I knew that would bite me on the butt with Willie saying that I was undermining him, and I never did, and I should have, but I never did. I stayed away from them at all costs. And then, of course, it came back that Willie would say that I never cared about the team. So it was a no-win type of situation. So,
by the way, we did check. It's Sports Channel. Sports Channel was the New York.
Oh, yeah, Sports Channel, New York. There was all the different sports channels. In Philly, it wasn't called Sports Channel. They had their own name in Philly. There were sports channels.
I think that might have been called Sports Vision. But the irony is that all of those, I think all those three, I think Philly, Boston, New York, Chicago, actually all came together with a merger later in the decade. So, but yeah, you're basically talking about the beginnings of pay TV sports.
Yeah.
And now what is now a very robust marketplace. But so give me all right. So you're the idea of soccer overall and Chicago, I guess, too, very much in your rearview mirror. So
here's what happened.
Yeah.
Listen to this. I won opportunity to exit the sports business. 2 weeks after I get back from that trip and I'm gone, it was little blurb was in the paper that I left. I get a call from Bear Stearns, which was a big investment house in Chicago, big money city. And they're calling me, and I said, guys, I don't think I said I got fired, but I've just left. I don't have any money to invest or anything like that. No. We want you to come in and talk to us about joining us. I said, as what? So they said, well, we want to talk to you. So I went in and talked to these guys, and they said, well, we'd like, obviously, you know about business, and we'd like you to come and join us because you know people. I said, guys, I don't know the athletes really at all, and it's just not some of these. They said, but you know all the owners, and you're a name in town, which I didn't think I was. And so I went back and talked with Linda, my wife, and I said, well, this is very interesting because I am good with numbers and quick, and I always had an interest in the stock market and options in that area. And so she said, well, you know, this would be a total change in lifestyle. And she actually informed me that there was something called a weekend, and that most people didn't work and they enjoyed the weekends, because I, of course, always worked the weekends. So I said, well, let me go back in. So these guys offered me 6 weeks of training, and I would have been making more money during the training than I had ever made, 20% more than this thing, and that was more than I ever made. I mean, this is nuts. So I said, well, yeah, okay. The day I say okay, I got 2 phone calls, one from the Washington Redskins and one from Raycom Sports, which was the largest college sports syndicator in the country at the time. So they wanted to talk to me. And, of course, I hadn't gotten any calls for a year, and now I get all this. So I say, let me just go and talk to them. So I go to Washington and meet. They needed a PR director, and I meet with John Kent Cook, Jack Kent Cook's son. And it was roughly 4.5 minutes, and I said, guys, I'm not your guy. You think you can control the media and should. You've already said that if it wasn't, you know, they sell newspapers because when we win or lose and people want to read about it. I said, you know, I'm an information guy. I would give them information. I know what not to give them, and I know how to steer them, but there's no embargoes here for me. So thank you very much. I fly down to Raycom, and I had gotten to know a lot about the television business because of MISL, and I got a little production experience thrown in as a director. Loved that. Did videos for, produced all of our advertising stuff, and so I liked that end, but I didn't know the business end. And Raycom, it was a mom and pop organization. They had the rights to ACC basketball, so that's all they needed. And they had some other conferences too, big conferences, all of them except for the Southeast and the Big East. So they wanted to open up a PR and promotion arm, and they never had one, either PR for the company or promotions on air to promote, their telecast, their games. So Rosa Gatti, who was the VP of PR at ESPN, recommended me. Rosa and I were Rosa's a Villanova grad, and we were friends from Philly. So I went down there to speak to the husband and wife, Rick and Dee Ray and Ken Haynes. And I said, well, I would do this I don't want to be a PR man, but I will do this for you to open it up. And they had told me that they were going to get into entertainment too. So I said, okay, that'll be great, but I want you to teach me the syndication business, how you clear stations, how you the advertising piece, how you make a deal with the conferences. So they said, sure. So they offered me the job. I went back, and it was in Charlotte. I went back to Chicago, told Linda, and she said, sure, this is what you got to do. Called Bear Stearns and said, I'm sorry, guys, I'm a sports guy. So that was my one time to get out. And there's the bridge to what I did next. I went down to Charlotte. Very different. First of all, it wasn't Chicago. The weather was real nice. One day I got a call, and they said, well, don't come in today. I said, why? What's the matter? So it had snowed 2 inches. They closed everything. That was really wild. Lived through Hurricane Hugo, which was a hurricane that came in 200 miles inland, knocked down a bunch of trees, all the power out for 2 weeks. That was great. And I opened up their PR and promotion arm, and They never got into entertainment. We had promotions set for series of 4 shows. The only thing they ever did, which was fascinating, was they syndicated a show done by Graceland. It was called Elvis's Graceland, where his wife took you on a tour. It was already packaged. It was already done. They did it twice a year on his birthday and the anniversary on his death. Did great ratings on it. I promoted it a little bit, but it did great ratings. But they never did what they wanted to do. So this was 88 or 89. The World Cup was coming to the U.S. I saw, through my contacts with soccer, I saw an incredible opportunity for Raycom to manage the media broadcast facilities for the World Cup. And I explained this to the husband and wife, and they told me, okay, go. There was some meeting somewhere. I went, and really this would be a big thing. It would be in Washington, and 200 countries, 100 countries, whatever it was. So a huge money-making thing. I came back, I explained it to them, I started putting together some of the numbers. They really weren't having me do much of anything else. I would create budgets, and things like, give me $100,000 and I'll promote the ACC, which is basically Atlanta to Washington. I'll do that. What's one rating point increase worth? They say $1 million. So I said, okay, give me $100,000 and we'll turn it into $1 million by increasing one rating point from 16 to 17. They wouldn't do it. They had a group of us. There were 3 or 4 former ADs that would sit around. They wouldn't let us do things. So I went back at them about the soccer, and they said, no, this is, they were afraid. They were afraid to pull the trigger on the entertainment. So I went and went to another meeting on my own, and I came back, and they fired me. They said, we told you not to go. I said, I just went on my own on a weekend. What? I said, okay, small minds and lovely people. Great, I'm going to see them next month in Hilton Head. But that was it. I met a guy there. All the 3 major syndicators were all in Charlotte. It was crazy. What was the name of it? Jefferson Pilot, who had the Southeast Conference, football and basketball and a few other things. They were a big insurance company. They were in Charlotte. And then Bray Carey, who had a bunch of little conferences, what UNLV played in back then, I think it was called the Big West. He had that. So he was there. So I went to talk to him about packaging things, and he had marketing and, not just selling the time, basically, but packaging it with marketing, different promotions and things like that the schools would do for you. He had no idea what I was talking about. It was the beginning of that. He just didn't see it at all. But he said, you should talk to this guy I have working for me, Jim Drucker. I knew the name Jim Drucker was the commissioner of the Continental Basketball Association, the CBA. And so I went and I talked to him, and we sat down at lunch in Charlotte and started talking, and quickly realized that he was a major sport, basketball, in minor markets, and I was a minor sport, soccer, in major markets. So there's got to be some way we could fit this together. And as you can tell, as we're 2 hours into this, I can talk, Jim can talk, and the idea started flowing. So we sat in this place and for lunch, then it became dinner, and we decided, let's get together. And Jim said, okay, 2 things, and Jim's a real smart guy, Duke law grad, and said, there's 2 things I have to have. We're not going to do this nickel and dime like out of our garage, and we have to do this in Philly. And I said, well, why Philly? So he said, because I live there. I've been commuting down here for a year. So I said, okay. He said, you don't mind moving to Philly? I said, Jim, I'm from Philadelphia. I have a son there. I think they'll let me back into town. I'll grow a mustache. They won't recognize me. I'll be able to come back. I never thought I'd leave Philly because of great sports, and then I never thought I'd come back. So I did. In 1990, we went back. We started this company. It was a television company. We gained the rights Jim gained the rights to the Metro Athletic Conference in MAC, the MAAC. Sienna LaSalle was in it at the time with the Player of the Year, Lionel Simmons. and I gained the rights to the oldest and largest track and field meet, the Penn Relays. And I had heard about something called Hoop It Up, which was a 3-on-3 basketball that Tim, you, me, and 2 other of your friends in Chicago could form a team and play in this. And I heard about it. It was a big thing in Dallas. So I talked to them, called the guy, Terry Murphy, who started it, and he'd gotten involved with Pepsi and Pizza Hut. And it was starting to cookie cut it all around the country, 8 different places. It did it in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, it rained. And Jim and I promised that we weren't going to do events because it rains, but of course we were out there looking at this. And Terry finally came to us and asked us, could we do it? And we said, we'll only do it if we could put it on television. And it was ludicrous. Who's going to put that on television? I mean, you know, it was you and me playing. Who's going to watch that? So we said, okay, we'll only do it if we can do it on television, thinking it'll never get done. We go into the Fox affiliate in Philly, Channel 29, who had just taken over the Phillies' rights. So this was summertime, and we're talking to the station manager who starts asking us questions that are yes or no questions. Can we do this? Can we do that? And, you know, we're salesmen, and we say yes to everything. So he starts calling in his sales manager. Can we package it together? We understood that. He called in his technical guy, called in his production. Well, we can't produce it because of the unions. Do you know how to produce it? Yeah, we can produce it. We'll provide facilities. How about, can we use these announcers, our 6 o'clock news, sports guys? Oh, of course we can. Everything we said yes. Jim and I walked out. The guy said, I'm locking the door. We actually have a deal. So we walked out, and, you know, there's this rule. You never talk about the deal you just did in the elevator going down because you never know who's in the elevator. We get outside, and we say to each other, did we just do something that we don't want to do? And we said yes, and we started this thing that had 400 teams the year before. We television promotions, $80,000 worth of promotion, tied in with a supermarket chain there in Philly, and suddenly we're looking at 1,000 teams playing on 80 courts in a parking lot, Franklin Mills, out in Philadelphia. Do a 2-hour live show from a place that's not in an arena. We're like all over the place. Kick it off with a slam dunk contest with a guy jumping over a car. This was 1990, and we've got this amazing thing, and within 2 years, we're doing 7 of them, 3 in New York. We closed down, not Penn Station, but Grand Central Station. We do it around Grand Central Station. We're out on Long Island. We do one in Baltimore, and we do one on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, that right up, close Pennsylvania Avenue right up to the White House. And we have them televised in every place. Now, Pepsi and Pizza Hut have gone to the NBA. NBA is NBC. They're televising them, but we're not on NBCs anywhere. But they're growing like crazy. Our Long Island event had 5,000 players playing on 100 courts over 2 days. We had one contest, one division, everybody in the 4 teams that had a transplant. I mean,
and now it's a pro league with the big 3.
Yeah,
Cube, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was great. We started we said, well, let's do one on our own. We went to Herman's Sporting Goods and met a guy there who was a outlandish thinker, and we did a volleyball tournament, a beach volleyball, same premise. Great. Did it in Atlantic City in front of Trump Plaza with Trump as the sponsor. And I just reminded myself of a big piece. When I was the director, in between Raycom and moving to Philly, I was the director of the Tour de Trump, the bike race, the first one that NBC owned, Trump owned, Jefferson Pilot owned, and it was going to be the Tour de France of America. And I was not television director, but a director, and ultimately my job ended up, after we got into the 16 cities, my job was to make sure the Donald, as he was known then, met the most important person in every city. I flew around, spent close to 2 weeks with him. It was great. Never saw anybody or any company spend money. We had 5-color business cards in 1989. It was unbelievable. That was a little aside. Now we're back in Philadelphia. We're doing that, and we have we're driving up to ESPN with about 5 different show ideas, and we start talking about. We had promised ourselves we were not going to do outdoor events or any league because of owners. We all run into owners. So it's a long drive from Philly to Bristol, and we start talking about different leagues. No, Jim, we're not doing soccer. It's going nowhere. It's done. It's dead. Forget it. Okay, so what's available? So the only thing really available was women's basketball. Well, we both knew, come on, Joe Sixpack is never going to watch a group of women, no matter how good they are and how skilled and how great to watch them play the game the way it's supposed to be played. They'll never watch it because Joe Sixpack knows that he could get on the court with them and beat them. Whereas even if he thinks he could be an NBA player, he knows deep down, no, I can't be. I can't be an NFL player. I can't hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. But a women's basketball, yeah, I could beat them. So, of course, on the way back from Bristol, we decided to do that. And the only way to start a women's league was if they could dunk, because most people, guys, Joe Sixpack, can't dunk. How do you have them dunk? Lower the baskets. So we created the Liberty Basketball Association. And Tim, with all your knowledge and all your great, delving into things and finding and research, I bet you don't know too much about the Liberty Basketball Association.
All I know is 1991.
Very good. And we went out, same format of, oh my God, I forgot all about arena football. We'll
come back to that. I want to talk about the Liberty Basketball Association. This is a hidden chestnut that wasn't even on the agenda. Go ahead.
Not on the agenda, right.
The Liberty Basketball Association. Let's hear it.
LBA. So same format as MISL and arena football. Go to the arenas, their landlords. They want to turn lights on. Find us ownership. By that point, the regional sports networks had really built up. So we went to 5 or 6 of them. This is great. Went to ESPN, did a 5-game deal on ESPN, and everything we were cooking. So let's do a all-star game. Of course you do an all-star game before you ever have a sport. So I called a friend at the Palace of Auburn Hills who handled entertainment, Tom Troze, and I knew that he was crazy enough to do something different. He gave us President's Day, Monday, noontime, maybe 2 o'clock. Okay, but the schools were closed, and, that's pretty good. I think it was, February. So February in Detroit, that's pretty smart. So we put this together. We get, Jim gets one of his old CBA coaches. I get Dick Harder, who was the very successful Penn coach. Took him into I don't think the Final Four, but the Elite Eight. But on his bench, his assistants were Chuck from the Pistons, who was later he was the coach of the U.S. Olympic team, the great team. Chuck, he passed away, Hall of Fame. Can't think of it. Raleigh Massimino was on that staff.
You're thinking about Chuck Daly?
Chuck Daly, yeah. Of course. So Dick Harder was the main guy. Was the Hornets' first coach in Charlotte. So we got him. He was between jobs. We got him. We got 20 women players, and Danskin. We got 4 sponsors: AT&T, Minolta, Danskin, and can't think of the other one. Could have been McDonald's. Danskin said, how about if we create unitards for these players? A year before, North Carolina State, Jimmy Valvano, I think it was a year before, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, he had the players playing unitards. It was kind of interesting, with shorts over them. So we said, sure, of course. So now we're in Chicago, 2 days of practice, learn that women don't know how to dunk because they never think of it. You and I think, oh yeah, if we had that ability, we could dunk, and we vision ourselves. They don't do that. And a couple of the women were 6'6", one was 6'3", one was 6'4", good athletes. We taught them how to dunk. Oh, by the way, the ball was smaller, and the court was a little smaller too. They played, they practiced, they thought there was no women's league at the time. This is great. Dick Harder said, I love this. They come to practice and they're smiling. You know, he's used to guys who, another practice. So we go in, we're going to have the first ever women's slam dunk at halftime. ESPN is doing the game live. Scott Hastings, the crazy 6'11" guy for the Pistons, wearing a tux with sneakers. And I can't think of who did the play-by-play. So we're doing the game. We had 10,000 people there. It was President's Day. Schools were closed. It was great. Going up and down, promoting this at halftime. About 2 minutes before the half, all the lights in the building go off. The telecast is shut down. ESPN immediately throws on tape of something. Tom Trost from the Palace comes over to us. Jim and I are standing literally in the dark. And he said, you made this happen, didn't you? What? He said, well, the girls can't dunk, right? I said, what are you talking about? So I, to this day, I don't know if he was kidding or not, but I said something like, oh, yeah, we put a call into God and said, turn the lights off. We can't figure out. So the lights came on. The lights went off right before the dunk contest started. They had spotlights that we used, but then the lights went on. They did the slam dunk. There were 2 slam dunks in the game, breakaways. The 6'6" girls were fine. The basket was 9 feet 2 inches. We had a big press conference in New York, and where we announced that it's 9 feet 2 inches because women are 10% shorter than men. So we made the basket 10% shorter than the men's 10 foot. Now, first of all, women being 10% shorter, we have no idea. We made that up. And if you did the math, 10% off of 120 inches, which would be 10 feet, would not be 9 foot 2 inches. No one ever checked, ever asked us, never said anything. It was 9 foot 2 inches because I can't remember the name of the company that made those movable baskets, but they're lowering it. They were able to stop. This is where it stopped. I don't know what the engineering was. So that's what it was. So we played this game. It was great. Got some ratings. People liked it. The sponsors liked it. And the recession hit immediately. And AT&T called us. I'll never forget this meeting. We went up to see the guy. He said, I've just had a $40 million cut in my budget. Now, who even has a $40 million sports marketing budget? How many? You could count them on one hand. He said, I'm going to keep you guys. I'm cutting some of the people I've had for years, but I love this. It's a thing that's going to happen big. But I got to cut you in half. Okay. Minolta cut us totally. Danskin didn't really matter much. And I don't know who the fourth one was. So Jim and I said, well, nobody's doing this. We'll put it on the back burner. We went to the Women's Basketball Association, Coaches Association. Half of them hated us. We want to do it the same as men, blah, blah, blah. The other half said, oh, a pro league, I could get a job, my players could become pros, it is exciting. You know, the forward-looking thinkers, the lockdown thinkers. Never came off the back burner. Went to see David Stern. Now, Jim knew David well because he had a relationship with the CBA, the officials, and the start of maybe some players. Plus, Jim's dad was Norm Drucker, who was, I think, 40 years an NBA and ABA referee. So you always bring a tuna fish sandwich up to see David Stern. We went up there talking. He's listening. He's loving it. And a young guy walks by with a stack of videotapes still in there. He calls the young guy in, and he says, "What are you working on?" He said, "Oh, I'm putting together a Michael Jordan highlight reel." "Oh, okay, thanks." So David turns to us and says, "So that highlight reel will net us $1 million. You're asking me to go to my owners and tell them that this is a great new idea and we're going to get into women's basketball, which we talked about, but we're going to lose $1 million. What do you think would work?" So we said, okay. He said, "Guys, do it. Start it up. If it works the way we think it'll work, we'll buy into it." We never did it. And Jim and I had a bit of a falling out. He got sick. Some things happened. Ironically, he became the commissioner of the Arena Football League. Hoop-it-ups were still going strong, but I was the villain in that one. Little did I know Jim would go down Jim loved to negotiate. He over-negotiated. He'd go down to Dallas and negotiate a new deal, and everything that went wrong was my fault. I didn't know that was going on, so that was fine.
Well, so we need to put a pin on that one. So the Liberty Basketball Association was 1991, and I a quick check of the internet, which is a beautiful thing. The actual date was February 10th, 1991.
There you go.
And you had 10,753 spectators at the Palace of Auburn Hills. Do you remember the team? Do you remember the team names that were planned besides the Detroit Dazzlers?
Oh, very good. I don't know.
Chicago Slammers.
There you go.
Los Angeles Lancers, the New York Blasters, and the Philadelphia Freedoms. A little tip of the hat to the old UTT franchise back in the 70s and World Team Tennis.
Very good. Very good.
So that's interesting. We have just discovered a new forgotten sports nugget. This is pretty interesting stuff. I guess now the real challenge, though, and Doug, maybe you might know this, that game that was broadcast on ESPN, I wonder where that tape might be, and why it's not yet on YouTube. So we put that out to our listeners. Anybody who might even remember vaguely in 1991 watching this thing called the Liberty Basketball Association, we got to find that video. And our friends at ESPN perhaps can help us find that, because unbeknownst to me, unbeknownst to us, our listening audience, the one game of the Liberty Basketball Association, now vividly remembered by Doug Verb.
One and done. Has a different meaning now.
All right, so let's get into. So let's maybe we can round up our extensive conversation here around the Arena Football League. So maybe you can give us a little bit of how that occurred, why you got dragged into that, and especially for somebody who seemingly seems like he wanted to sort of maybe extricate himself from professional sports, but somehow didn't. What was the Arena Football League thing for you? What was that all about?
Yeah, well, first of all, I never got dragged into anything. I was a willing victim, believe me. I loved every piece of it. And I had chances after soccer. I had chances to go into the NBA and a couple teams and all that. And my wife, bless her heart, reminded me that, you'll probably have one of your wild hair ideas. You'll go in and talk to them. They'll say, "We don't do things like that here," and you'll be out the door. So don't do that. And maybe don't even work for somebody, because she did not like the 2 a.m. phone calls from Lee Stern about, something going wrong or something, whatever it was. But I loved every minute of it. So I told you that when I went away, on a 1-week vacation between games, and Lee fired my dear friend and marketing director, who was really good and made me look good. So it was 3 weeks before this season, and I needed a marketing guy. And lo and behold, a guy named Jim Foster calls me and said somebody recommended. He talked to me. He had been at the NFL Properties is what they were called. That's a great story into itself. They were a non-profit, and where the NFL used to give away all their money, all that properties money, to charity and to some of the guys who ran it. But they didn't know that the guys that were running it were taking the money. But anyway, not Jim Foster, but the guys who were actually running it. So Jim called me, and he's an Iowa guy, and he wanted to come back to Chicago. So I said, well, Jim, come in. Yeah, let's talk. So we were playing, for some unknown reason, we were playing at some big high school, an outdoor soccer game. I don't know what that was, if it was training for indoor, who knows. But I'm sitting under the stands, and Jim comes in and takes out what has now become the famous manila envelope, where he had all these sketches and everything. And I said, what's this? He said, well, I was at the All-Star game at Madison Square Garden that you did, and I kind of thought of, I was working for the NFL and kind of thought of the idea of, well, if they can do indoor soccer, why can't we play football indoors? So he starts explaining the whole thing to me. So I said, Jim, you know, this is, you're talking to me about, this is a job interview for soccer, right? So he said, yeah, I know, but you really did, you know this stuff, and you know how to do it and all that, and this is what I want to do. So I said, okay, great. So I said, let's concentrate on this, and let's figure out a way that we can, make this work. I can't afford you. We didn't even talk money, but I knew. So I said, but I have an idea, and my wife was working at an agency, Burke Advertising, who literally, the guy created Outdoor Magazine. And so I said, maybe Burke really wants to be our agency of record. Now, the truth is, we don't have much of a media budget, and I produce everything anyway, all of the creative stuff. So let's go in and talk to him. So we went in and talked to the guy, and the guy said, well, how about if I take Jim on and I'll pay him, and one of the things he'll work on is the Sting account, which is exactly what I wanted him to say. So he did, and Jim went to work there. And as my wife tells the story, Jim always had the door closed, and he was taking phone calls about arena football. So I said, okay, good. And he did what he had to do for us. So, like I said, we had no budget, so what was it to do? So when I was done, I called Jim, and I said, okay, I'm ready to do this. So he had just gotten some money from an agency in New York, some seed money. So we worked for about, I want to say it was 6 or 8 months together in Chicago at our house, talking on the phone, and Jim would work on the game itself, and I would work on, again, that formula, go to the arenas. I knew the arena people, get that moving, and I worked on some media, and at one point I said, Jim, we got to get something down on tape. These drawings, great, we can professionalize them, but let's, really do something. So he said, well, how are we going to do that? So I said, well, I have a friend in Rockford, Illinois, Doug Logan, who runs the building up there, and we used to play 1 or 2 indoor exhibition games up there. I think it's 90 miles from Chicago. Let me call Doug and see if we can get something together. You find some semi-pro guys here in Chicago, put together with some coaches, and we didn't even know how many players on the field, how we were going to do things. We knew that the nets were up, which I thought was a brilliant idea, and, that kind of stuff. So I call Doug and say, I need your place. So he said, well, what for? And I said, well, I can't really tell you, but it's something you'll like. So he said, do you have insurance? And, of course, I said, yeah, of course I have insurance. So he said, okay, I can give you Saturday. I'm making this up. Saturday, March 13th. So we go back, and now we had maybe 4 or 5 weeks to get this together. Jim gets a group of players together on that same where we were playing that outdoor game. It was AstroTurf high school field. We got the high school field, And he starts training these players, and they didn't know what they were training for except semi-pro football. So the one rule, and it doesn't really matter. I don't think it was my idea, but I love the idea. It must have been Jim's. Was that the players would play man on man. In other words, Tim, you're the wide receiver for the Chicago Bulldogs. I'm the defensive back for the Philadelphia Shenanigans. I'm covering you. When the Shenanigans have the ball, you're covering me. So it was really man on man. Because when when Eli Manning is on the field against Tom Brady, they're not against each other. They never even, before the game, they shake hands. After the game, but otherwise they're never on the field together. This way you did. Everybody but the quarterbacks. I thought it was a great idea. Also cut down on the number of players, and you had Iron Men out there, and people could relate to that. So we went up to Rockford, had everything set, had one set of netting. The players who didn't know anything about indoor, we never told them that. They come on, and now it's a flashback to the Adams. They thought this is where they were going to just change clothes. And we take them out onto the field and say, you're going to play a game here, and we don't really know what the rules are. So we get some videotape. Really funny because the one thing we forgot was a referee shirt. So Doug Logan found some striped shirt, and it's me down there with a whistle. That's a really terrifying thought. But so I'm down there, and we're trying 7 men, 8 men, all different kinds of things. We get a videotape. But Doug Logan, being the extremely forward-looking, bright, expansive guy, said, this is the greatest thing in the world. It's football, and it's indoors, and the fans are on top of it. Hell, they can smell it. And I wanted that to be our tagline. So we said, great, that's wonderful. Well, Doug happened to be the president of the Arena Operators Managers Association, whatever it's called. He said, if you can do this again in a month, I'll get the 40 top arenas here to see this. I said, oh, my God, what could be better? So I said, how about a crowd? He said, just so happens in a month, the Rockford Marathon, the famous Rockford Marathon, will end right outside of our door. We'll bring everybody in after the marathon. So he did his part. We did our part. We narrowed it in, whatever the rules were, 7 guys, whatever. Don't you know, again, we forgot the official's jersey. But I again was down there, and we had all of these guys looking at it, and we got stuff on tape, and it was exciting, and it was good. And were able to really start going forward. Well, from a personal standpoint, the money ran out. And Jim Foster, whose idea was I was perfectly fine, second banana, no problem with that at all, but Jim Foster would offer me nothing more than 10%. And I said, Jim, it's got to be 51-49. You can have the 51. But, Jim, I've been in this, I'm doing these things for you. You're doing a lot of stuff, but every media person you talk to was because of me, every arena operator. We got to be partners in this. And he wouldn't do it. It was his idea. He wouldn't do it. Wouldn't budge off of the 10. I said, see ya. And that's when I got the call from Bear Stearns and all that and went to Charlotte. So that was arena football. And Jim stayed at it. I think it was 3 years, did all kinds of things, finally put it together, and the rest is history, and he did well with it. This is my outside view. I had nothing to do with it. I was always shocked that they were never able to really capture it on television. Great spectator sport on television. They couldn't. And he had ESPN, and I know the people, top production people. He had NBC as a partner. I mean, like a real financial partner. And they put their good production people. Couldn't capture it on television. Got the NFL involved. Everything. Jim, with his ego, was his undoing. He finally, Jim Foster, that is, they pushed him aside. They gave him a franchise, which he did in Iowa. The Barnstormers did well. with it, and they pushed him aside further. And Baker, I can't remember his first name, guy who heads the Football Hall of Fame now in Canton, he was the commissioner, and he did a good job with it too. They did well with it, but they just couldn't get it going. And now I don't know, they're down to 3 or 4 teams, and that was a single. It was a single entity.
Yeah, that was and we've had a couple of conversations with Jim in some previous episodes, and I think it's a theme. It's a theme that keeps coming back, and I asked you about it earlier with the many hours ago when we were talking about the MISL, the idea of single entity versus that of franchises. And if I remember our conversation with Jim correctly, it was one of those scenarios where, and we've heard this with in our conversations about the Major Indoor Lacrosse League with, in the same kind of conversation around this idea of the tension between wanting to control in a sort of a moderated kind of way, sort of in a single entity kind of a manner, with the chafing, I guess, of owners or investors or investor owners who see the value of wanting to run their own franchise in the league and kind of have a little bit more flexibility and the ability to sort of win championships and go out and get talent and all that kind of stuff. And, I think Jim reflected back and said, that was sort of the beginning of the end, is when he had to go, sort of bow to the pressures of folks who wanted a franchise. And the same thing we learned in our lacrosse conversations as well. So it's a very interesting tension. And this is a story that gets repeated over and over and over again for decades and even centuries back. You go to the earliest days of baseball, the same kind of issues around single entity versus sort of franchising. And it still today, to this day, it becomes a tension-filled conversation about what's the best model for pro sports.
It's interesting, too, because the very essence of when you think of franchise, you think of a baseball franchise or you think of a McDonald's franchise. And obviously McDonald's, Burger King, every franchise, there's thousands of them now, they work. The difference is that they're all the same, and that's what makes them work. There's no competition. They're not going to put you're not going to compete with a McDonald's across the street. Sports, it's the competition, and that lends itself to people being creative in their here's what we're going to do to put together a better team on the field to win. So I think people think that they should have more control, but the business side is totally different than the field side, and it's never really seemed to happen. And the most successful, the NBA is successful because David Stern was a master at getting consensus and getting the teams, the owners, together about something. And the NFL is successful because they've controlled the union. Baseball has not been so successful because the union controls them and their costs are outrageous. Hockey had to go, everybody. Gary Bettman did the only thing he could do, create a strike, reset. He had to reset things. Now it's getting back up there again. But, of course, the franchise fees are getting back up there. The guy here in Vegas paid $500 million for a franchise. The next one, the one in Seattle, I think is going to be $600 million. So, yeah, does the single entity work? No, I don't think anybody ever really knows because none of the big guys could ever, they're so big. There's such a gap between the big guys and everything else. So I don't know. Can you do it? Does it hurt you to try to do it? I don't know that it hurts you.
Yeah, I think Major League Soccer is probably our biggest experiment right now, and then there's obviously a lot of tension from a lot of different circles around sort of pro soccer and why we didn't make the World Cup and all that kind of stuff around. Is it time to, shall we say, loosen the belt a bit and maybe, the idea of sort of it being owner investors, right? That was sort of our conversation with Russ Klein about lacrosse that's airing this week when we record this show is sort of a hybrid of that, but it's still single entity. All the contracts are done through the league and all that kind of stuff. And there are many a question, right, despite the parity and the relative competitiveness of the product on the field, albeit certainly not anything near the European leagues, for example, is maybe part of the problem maybe going forward is that how do you get to those leagues, stature and competitiveness and world stage value without not letting go of the single entity thing at some point. I think, look, MLS is 20 plus years old now. I always thought that the idea was, and especially in tough times, Lamar Hunt and Phil Anschutz and those kind of folks, literally keeping the league going in the early 2000s when things were not so great and they contracted and all that. The reality is that, I think at some point, it was never intended to sort of stay as a single entity. And yet you're looking at 25, 26, teams and franchises and stuff. At some point, you got to think that it's going to go completely full franchise, but, maybe it's still not, it's not solid enough yet to actually pull that trigger.
You don't know. They, I guess, survived the worst thing that you can have, which is, didn't Anschutz own at one point? Wasn't it 5 or 6 franchises? Maybe as many as that?
Yep.
And no one really cared. It didn't matter to the fans. I don't think anybody stayed away, or there was never any thought of collusion or anything like that. So does it matter? The real question might be, did anyone not get involved from an ownership standpoint because it was single entity? That's, I think, the question. But, you can't really compare with soccer and the rest of the world because the rest of the world doesn't have football, basketball, and hockey and baseball. So how can you compare that? I don't know if is there really a connection between the World Cup, the national team, and the league, other than if you could keep the best players here. And I maintain that most of the best players, if they were making more money, they would say, okay, well, yeah, I'd love to play in the Bundesliga or, in England, but I'm making 10% more money by playing here and I'm home, then they would stay. And my overall thing about soccer is that until the U.S. national team makes the Final Four, it'll be a one-off special event. The MLS will never make money. It's just the way it is because there's so many other things. But if they look what happened look at the bump with women. A lot of people watch the women's national team. You get nationalism. And they were good, and they won, and it was exciting. They can't get a league started at all. No one's going to watch that. And they can't. The men, if they got it, the times that they, like the furthest of what, did they make the Elite Eight? 1 year, one World Cup?
Yeah, 2002 in Korea, Japan. They
right,
very, very
right. Well, there were a lot of people that were very, very excited about it, and now it's slid back. So they should have the next time, 16, I guess, they should have made a run for the Final Four, and they slid back. It wasn't because of the MLS, I don't think. It just happens. But when you're young and they're still young, you can't afford those missteps, because a misstep will slide back 4 years but put you back 8 or 12 years, right? They didn't even make it this year. So they have no opportunity. Not this year, but 20. They don't have no opportunity. And
well, we shall see. I do think that I do think soccer is unique and different in that it is truly the world sport. The United States is not the supreme league, or frankly, the only place where the sport is played, which was largely the cases for most of the other major sports in this country, right? So, I think the only real test will be when the sort of artificiality, those shackles of single entity are sort of released, and MLS then, and the teams and the franchises and the individuals who might own those franchises can maybe go at it toe-to-toe with some of the world's best players, world's best teams with talent and all that kind of stuff. Because there's no unending riches, it seems, with, the Champions League and all the teams in Europe and that kind of stuff. And my sense is that some of the folks in the league now sort of eye that and want to sort of get competitive. And the artificiality of the way the league is set up will not allow them to compete for some of the best talent without the ability to have more flexibility to do so. So we'll see.
Well, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I guess that's true. I just don't know how many, big money people would want to get into that mode. Like if you look at England and how they've brought in, oligarchies and, oil men and all of that. And in fact, how much of the big money people have now in America have gone over there? How many American owners are there in the English leagues? There's a number of them, aren't there?
Sure. Well, it'll to be seen. I mean, the MLS is well on its way to 28 to 30 franchises, and who knows? And we're still in a decent economy, although you never know what happens, right? And you've lived through a few of those busts, macroeconomically. All right, so let's round the curve here. What give me a sense of what you're up to these days, and what do you want to promote? Now, let's also remind folks about what you're planning for December. I think it is in Las Vegas. Yeah. For the MISL reunion.
Yeah, well, I am planning. I'm really going to have to get to work on it now, but I've gotten some real good feedback from a number of people that want to be part of it, and I'm going to have to go and talk to some of the big properties here, the casino properties here, see how they can get involved. Also, there's a team here that's in hiatus, the Las Vegas Legends, and there's some facilities. I don't know if players want to play or do they just want to get together and drink and eat and reminisce and tell tall tales. I don't know. So I think what I'm going to do is put out some feelers, ask some questions, see what people respond to. I'm not sure the Christmas time idea, if that's a good idea, the way the dates work out. But I'm going to do it, and I feel good about doing it now. I think we still have enough time, so it'll be great fun. It's been really good talking and reminiscing with people, and even sad to hear some of the people who have passed away that I didn't know about. Chet Messing, who was our first player that we signed in a big deal, did a big press conference with him. He's all for the NASL, not the NASL, but there is an NASL. I think it would be their 50th. I don't know, but it's something that they're doing in conjunction with the opening of the new Soccer Hall of Fame in near Dallas. So they're doing something, I've heard. And Shep told me that he didn't want any parts of that, but he absolutely would do ours. He said, I loved MISL and indoor soccer. And I was really kind of pleasantly surprised to hear that. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I have a large part of my business, no pun intended, is the world's largest jersey. I've done that for 24 years now. It's a proprietary product. I gave up on the hot dog launcher because I was a little afraid, dangerous of people falling out of the stands trying to get a hot dog or a T-shirt that was propelled into the stands. And so I do that. And, of course, here in Las Vegas, all of a sudden in 3 years we've become a sports, we have the hockey team that has done very, very well beyond expectations. We have the Raiders coming here in 2 years, 3 years, 2.5 years, I guess, building a $1.8 billion stadium here. The state, gave the Raiders $750 million to come here, build a stadium, twice as much as any municipality has ever given anybody. And I might add, Nevada as a state is, and this is not a joke, is right down there with Mississippi and Arkansas at the bottom of the education list. I don't think I have to say anything more. But I'm thrilled that they're doing it. I just wish the money was put somewhere else. And of course, it's just going to be, a point, maybe 0.2% added fee to room charges. So we're not paying for it, but we're paying for it by not having, the education that we need here to grow. Thrilled about that. There is a USL soccer team that
Las Vegas Lights.
They've done the Las Vegas Lights. They have done brilliant marketing and work. Tremendous stuff. The marketing director, the owner, who did the same piece in Orlando. He started with the USL team and grew it. He didn't own it, but he worked it and grew it to, I think it's a successful MLS franchise now. He's doing it here. And they've really, I went to the home opener. It's good energy around. They're playing it where the 51s, the baseball team, who attract nobody because they do no marketing at all. They're playing there. The field is real close to the stands, which is nice. The 51s are moving into a brand new stadium in Summerlin, so next year the Lights will have it to themselves. So that's good. And we also now have a women's WNBA team owned. How things have changed. 3 years ago, you couldn't get any pro team to talk about, Las Vegas because of the gambling. The worst being the NFL. No one in Las Vegas will ever call it the Super Bowl, the big game, the championship game, because the NFL sued Vegas a number of times. The NFL wouldn't take the Las Vegas Visitors and Convention Authority's money for spots on the Super Bowl or anywhere in the NFL. Now, we have not only the Raiders coming here, but we have a WNBA team owned by MGM hoping to show that they can make that work to get an NBA team here. So it's a very interesting atmosphere here. Dying to see what happens to the Golden Knights when the Raiders come here. Well, I've been here 14 years now, and early on I was contracted to do 2 studies on the viability of professional sports. And I got to say, after some very in-depth studies, I ended up saying, I don't know. It is a small media market. There's now 2.25 people, which is great, but they work 24 hours shifts. Very small media market. The Golden Knights found out that there's no regional sports market. Who's going to do our game? Put our games on television? And they found some AT&T something somewhere, and I bet most people don't know where to find it. And as you know, the biggest problem with hockey is you can't watch it on television unless you really know it. So that's been difficult. Haven't found out what their ratings have been. Town is, buzzing about how well they've done and they have done great. They're great to watch. I love watching them. They're good. They do a good job at the arena. It's a nice arena, the T-Mobile, and they do a good show. It's Vegas. And there's no marketing money here because you're either the big casinos or you're an entrepreneur. Zappos is here, but they do a little something. They do a lot with the soccer team, which has been good. So it's going to be a question. And the 7-digit deals that the hockey team has been trying to do become 8-digit deals for the Raiders. The seat licenses for the Raiders are going to be minimum $5,000. The average ticket price of the Golden Knights is $88, which is a pretty good price. And most people, the individual people that bought season tickets, bought them knowing that they could sell off quite a few of them to the visitors. The Red Wings come in, a ton of people from Detroit want to come into Vegas. It's a great thing. Be interesting to see when the Raiders get here. The estimates are that it'll be 30% of the crowd will be visiting. So, which is great, interesting. Heads in beds, which is good. So it's a fascinating place here. Vegas always is. UNLV, I think, is suffering mightily for a number of different reasons, but certainly their basketball and football are going to hurt more because of all this other competition. And UNLV basketball has been living mostly in the early, 90s, the Tark era, and haven't come out of that. They're going to play in the new football stadium. They have new football money has come in, and if they get 15,000 people in a 60 or 65,000 seat stadium, how's that going to look?
Not great.
No,
well, still, you're it's a very interesting market, and as an inveterate sports promotion guy, I can't imagine you're the stories and the work and the just the observations that you'll have yet to come. And speaking of that, we almost turned out 3 hours, and I think we've gone through our second glass of water with you, and I got to thank you just tremendously for regaling us in all of these great stops in your career. These are tremendous stories. We learned about new leagues that didn't even exist. And you are...
They never existed, right?
They never existed in some respects, right? This has been great and a very interesting journey, and I think just a wealth of information. And I'm knocked over by the people who respond to this show. We've been doing this for about a year or so. The nooks and crannies of the internet and people's devices and stuff. How people find out about it, and friends of friends, and the passion and the corrections that we get for various things about and stories and apocryphal remembrances that may or may not have been true. The audience is very rabid and very interested in this, and I suspect that our listeners will eat this conversation. If it's just one or maybe two episodes worth, they will eat it up. And I thank you so much for shining a light on some of these oft forgotten stories, and frankly, a trip down your memory lane, which is very educational and very interesting for me, certainly, and for our audience, hopefully. Well,
you shook the cobwebs out of my memory. I was coming up with things, and I didn't do any prep work. I'm looking for the MISL logo. I can't find it. It was never digitized. How about that? Let me leave you with two things I really appreciate. One is I'm going to leave you with a little nugget that the LBA, we actually made money in the LBA, and the way we made money was Jim Drucker created the logo, and if you looked at it, it was Jerry West with a ponytail. Okay? So before we said we'll put it on the back burner, not that anybody knows that it's on the back burner, the NBA lawyers called us and said, called Jim and said, Jim, you can't do it. It looks just like our logo. So Jim, being that master negotiated a fee to change it. I want to say it was $5,000. I'm sure he told the people that that's what the artwork was. So we made $5,000 on a league that never happened. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I got to tell you that when I go through this, and I'm over 40 years in the business, and I'm absolutely blessed that I have not worked a day in my life. This has never been work. It's never, not in any way, shape, or forms. In the hardest, worst times, in the best times, it was never work. And I haven't, this hasn't been exactly success central here. I mean, everything I've done has failed, but it's okay because somebody has to try it. Everybody that was involved in this made their best efforts without a doubt. Some things aren't made to happen at the right time, but I think most everybody you would talk to that's been involved in these sports will say they were absolutely blessed to be involved and have the opportunity to try to do something different. And that's the way I feel, and I've always felt this. I have some regrets on things that, like what I know now that I didn't know then, but no regrets on having tried or done any of it.
All right, there's a lot to unpack in that conversation, and I hope you took good notes, students. No, there will not be a quiz, but there's just an amazing amount of stuff to continue to dig into for this conversation with Doug, whom we thank profusely and tremendously for being part of this. So let's see. We talked about the North American Soccer League, Philadelphia Adams, check. We talked about the Chicago Sting, both of the NASL and indoor varieties of the MISL, check. We talked about the Major Indoor Soccer League itself, the league. Unbelievable big check mark there. And if you were listening carefully, we also unearthed the league that we didn't even know about. Oh my God, can you believe it? The Liberty Basketball Association. Holy cow. Talk about something that's so much more to come and unearth on that one, the Liberty Basketball Association. Only Doug Verb could lead us down those pathways into all of those things. And I do want to underline and reiterate that Doug is absolutely in the throes of putting together what is hopefully going to be the Major Indoor Soccer League reunion sometime in December, we think, hopefully in Las Vegas, where Doug lives. I am more than happy to pass along his email address. If you send us an email at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com, or just go to our website, or you can give us a tweet at goodseatsstill, or even send us a message on Instagram at goodseatsstillavailable. Or hell, even on our Facebook page devoted to our little show. I'm more than happy to put you in touch with Doug Verb to find out more about the upcoming Major Indoor Soccer League reunion that he is trying to put together in December in Las Vegas. I know once that gets solidified that I will absolutely want to be there myself, and I will pass along information to you as I find out about it from him as well. So let's see, what else do we have? So sportshistorycollectibles.com, thank you for your sponsorship. Audibletrial.com/goodseats. We thank you, Audible, for your sponsorship. And we, of course, thank our friends at Podfly Productions. And, of course, in particular, the one, the only, the Dr. Jerry Payne and his tremendous capabilities and his kind and helpful work in putting our pieces together editorially and production-wise. Podfly Productions, you will find them at podfly.net. And you will find me next week somewhere in your earbuds talking about some other fun topic around teams and leagues that don't exist anymore. It's called Good Seats Still Available. Thank you for listening. And until that time, we bid you a fond adieu.